All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Environment and Transportation Committee for Thursday, February 26th, 2024. We have a lot of bills to get through, so let's bring up HB 716, the 24th member of our committee, Delegate Griffith, motor vehicle registration, fee exemption, unemployment disabled veterans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just for the record, this will be my fourth bill and probably combined total of less than 10 minutes of testimony. So very, very cognizant. So yeah. Thank you, Delegate Love. Thank you, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Delegate Mike Griffith, and I'm requesting a favorable report on HB 716, motor vehicle registration, fee exemption, unemployable disabled veterans. So what this bill seeks to do is, I don't want to go back through the definition of unemployable veterans unless the committee would like me to. We kind of covered that in my DNR bill yesterday. So right now, currently, the Motor Vehicle Administration waives the vehicle registration fee for veterans that are currently at 100% disabled. At this threshold, there are currently slightly more than 33,000 registration of Class A passenger and Class M multi-purpose vehicles in Maryland. While I'm grateful for this, just like with the DNR bill yesterday, there's a loophole that about 4,000 disabled veterans are lost in, and that's that again from yesterday, the unemployable classification. Again, if anybody wants me to go back through that, I'm more than happy to, but we covered it yesterday, and for time's sake, not to go back through that. So in order, same way with the DNR bill, in order to rectify this technicality, HB 716 adds veterans determined to be unemployable due to service-connected disabilities to a list of qualifying for a vehicle registration waiver. And again, roughly about 4,000 Marylanders would qualify. And obviously 4,000 Marylanders aren't going to, many of these folks don't drive. So it's even a smaller subset of that who would actually use this benefit. And again, this is a simple change. It's not only a small token of our appreciation for the sacrifice made by these veterans, but also keep a small amount of change in their pockets during these tough economic times. Before I conclude, though, I do want to note two things, or one thing in the physical note. It does state that the physical note does state that the number of veterans who are less than 100% disabled but not have an unemployability designation is not known. We do know that number. Department of Veterans Affairs has provided us that number. That's 3,997 to be exact, as of FY23. And veterans who are not classified 100% disabled and unemployable, the unemployable benefits are for veterans who are not otherwise rated at 100% disabled. If a veteran disability rating is increased to 100% after previously being designated as unemployable, the unemployable rating is moot and is closed now that the veteran is at 100% threshold. So this is that, again, 4,000 Marylanders that fall into that. With this being said, like yesterday, this bill does have the support of the administration, full support of Maryland Department of Transportation, which issued a letter of support, the Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs, and the General Assembly Veterans Caucus. And with that, I would humbly request a favorable report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the bill sponsor? Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Delegate. You were just reading something and you had a bunch of numbers. Can you get those to us, please?
We'll get you everything. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this bill. It's a very good bill. I'm supportive, but I'm just curious about whether it would apply to more than one vehicle owned by a qualifying person, or is it just one vehicle? What if they own 5 vehicles? Are you going to apply this to all of their vehicles?
There is a cap on it, so I will get exactly what that cap is to you.
Yeah, it doesn't appear that way. Just at a quick glance of the bill, I was curious.
Well, so this bill doesn't contemplate that. This bill, Larry, because right now this already exists for veterans at 100% disabled.
Okay.
But so there's a subset called unemployable veterans.
Right, I see that.
So all this does is add unemployable veterans to the existing law.
Okay. Okay.
So to fix that loophole.
Okay.
So in the existing law, there's caps and other regulations, but I can get all that stuff to you as well.
Okay. Okay. At the bottom of page 1, it just says the following: vehicles plural are exempt, and then it says a vehicle owned by. So it made me curious.
Yes, I'll make sure to get it to you, Delegate.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any additional questions? Okay, that concludes the bill hearing on HB 716. Will we see you tomorrow?
I'll see you Tuesday.
See you Tuesday. All right. We'll now turn to HB 766, Calvert County Delegation. I think we have Delegate Fisher with us. Calvert County roadside solicitation of money for donations prohibition.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of ENT. Before you is House Bill 766. Also for the record, Delegate Mark Fisher, Calvert County, is a Calvert County delegation bill. And it's pretty straightforward. The bill prohibits in Calvert County, a person from standing in a roadway, medium divider, or intersection to solicit money or donations of any kind from the occupant of a vehicle. This bill actually, we discussed this last year as a delegation, and we worked it out with Delegate Long. He had some concerns, and so we went back to Calvert County and worked it out. So now everybody in the delegation supports it, the county commissioners support it, and the Calvert County senators support it. A great kumbaya moment.
Okay, I think there is a virtual witness. Do you want them to go before we do questions?
Sure.
Okay, can we bring up John Norris if he's available? Please go ahead, sir.
Afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is John Norris. I'm County Attorney for Calvert. I'm here on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners. President Hance wasn't able to join us today. It is with rising levels of traffic and number of pedestrians and Calvert being a rural community that we feel this is necessary. We found that there are half of Maryland jurisdictions already have some legislation like this in place. Is noted in the fiscal notes. I'm not going to go through all of those, but we're just asking to be included with Carroll, Charles, Hartford, Washington counties in the transportation article. Because we are so rural, we have 55-mile-an-hour highways going past medians that go into shopping centers that are only 18 inches wide. So there is a need for this legislation to protect the pedestrians, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the delegation chair or the witness, Delegate Teresa?
Oh, I think, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What's the penalty for doing this?
Mr. Norris.
I'm going to mute myself. The transportation article sets out the penalties today. I don't have that off the top of my head, so we will get that to you.
It would be the same as the other counties, though, but we're just adding our name to the other counties.
No, I'm aware of that, but I just didn't know what the penalty was.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to see you, Delegate. So I totally get this issue. I totally get that you guys are adding Calvert to a list of counties that already exist, but I'm just wondering if you have checked in with the AG's office. I know there was a 2015 Supreme Court case on free speech, and I think that panhandling is subject to intermediate scrutiny. And I know that the ordinances in Minneapolis, Austin, Texas, and a bunch of other places have been struck down accordingly. So I'm just wondering if you've touched base with the AG. And I know that obviously these other counties are already doing it. I get that, but I'm just wondering if that's unconstitutional.
That's why we have the county attorney.
Yeah,
on this
okay,
call.
fair enough.
So Delegate Long did reach out to the Attorney General's office and received an opinion. Initially, Calvert had requested to be treated like Cecil and other counties. Based on the AG's opinion, they did modify the request so that volunteer organizations will be treated the same as commercial businesses, and did not see anything in the AG's opinion that said that this is no longer permissible.
Okay, great. That's helpful. I'll try to get a copy of the AG letter. Just brief follow-up, Mr. Norris. Did you mean to say that you were trying to follow Cecil, but the AG's letter put a little bit of a cloud on Cecil's constitutionality? Is that what you mean?
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarification. So I assume that the way this is worded, that what you're concerned about is people standing in the roadway, obviously on the median and in the intersection. What if someone is, for example, selling, I'll just pick Girl Scout cookies on the side of the road at an intersection, or a lemonade stand, let's say, or something. Mm-hmm. Is that permissible, or does this address that as well?
Go ahead, John.
So being in the transportation article, this applies to state roadways. So it is the state roadways. They could still stand in front of the grocery store or in front of the electronics store and sell the cookies.
Right, but I was thinking more about the sidewalk, if they were on the sidewalk.
Calvert County being as rural as we are, we don't have many sidewalks adjacent to state roads.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
Yeah, we have one highway in, one highway out.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? How many traffic lights?
When I moved there were two.
Wendell
more
Beitzel
now.
used to tell me about the one traffic light in Garrett County, but I think it's gone up since then. Okay, I think that concludes the bill hearing on HB 766, but stay with us, Delegate Fisher, for HB 834, Calvert County Ethics Consequences of Conflicts of Interest Violations. I think you might have a panel. If you do, feel free to bring them up.
Sure, if I may, and thank you for letting these bills be heard one after another. Susan Zurich, Myra Gowans, and Josh Johnson should be on your list. They want to come up?
Yeah, please come up and
And
join
I'll-
Delegate Fisher.
Meanwhile, I'll start. And thanks again to the ENT Committee. Before you is House Bill 834. For the record, Delegate Mark Fisher. This bill is titled Calvert County Ethics Consequences of Conflict of Interest Violations. It's an emergency bill requiring the county to include a provision in its ethics law that are equivalent to or exceed the provisions of state law relating to a court's authority to enforce the ethics law. In addition, the bill requires Calvert County to enact a law or regulation requiring the removal of a county elected official from office for violations of conflict of interest statutes as specified. I am the Calvert County Chair. This is supported by the Calvert County delegation, the Calvert County senators, all the members, as well as the commissioners. You might notice that Delegate Long's name is not on here. He does support it now. He just wanted to do some checking with the county commissioners. And I'm perfectly happy if the committee wants to, if you want to change this to a delegation bill, I'm happy with that as well. But to be honorable, it made sense to put it in my name first because Delegate Long was not supporting of it. And we have a tradition in Calvert County of putting bills in only when all three of us agree. And so they now agree, which is good.
If your other panelists want to go ahead and speak.
Yes, my name is Myra Gowans, and I'm the founder of Calvert Citizens United, and I'm from Calvert County. Thank you and greetings to the chairman and the vice chair, Madam Vice Chair, and to the committee members. I want to tell you a little story and share with you information that is involved in how this got together and how this bill came to life. The past county commissioner voted for his own property and he tried to usurp the authority, the legal authority of the Calvert County Ethics Commission. In doing so, he ended up supporting his own property. He voted for his property. He seconded the motion for the property. And that is when Calvert Citizens United was formed. We speak for the people who have a voice. They have a voice. They don't tell you that they don't have a voice. They have a voice and they were not listened to. And those are the county citizens. We paid over $150,000 in legal fees, and we fought for the right to be able to allow people to know that we were involved in our county. So the commissioner in question, he didn't take on this case for 4 months. He took it on for 4 years. He sued the Ethics Commission chairperson, and it completely neutered the Ethics Commission in our county. So we are hoping that today you all will read documents that are presented by Ms. DeZurich and sent to everybody, and that you will vote positively for this bill to strengthen the Ethics Commission. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity today and for Delegate Fisher to present this bill. My name is Joshua Johnson. I represent 27,912 strong as the chair of Calvert County Republican Central Committee. With my father being in the pastorate, there's always been a need to get things right, to do what's transparent and what's selfless. This is the obligation that we have to the taxpayers in our community. HB 834 does this, and it is our hope that it moves forward. In emails and personal conversations with Delegate Long, Delegate Morgan, Senator Jackson, Senator Bailey, there's affirmations of this bill that show true partisanship, something that we sorely need. It's important to note that this bill would bring Calvert in line with state policy. We know this because of what Myra just mentioned. A commissioner, being the swing vote, voted on zoning changes that would directly profit them millions of dollars and change the landscape of our community. In a public outcry, taxpayers raised over $150,000 in a small community. That's very significant. With over 1,200 letters to our commissioners, the people spoke again. The commissioners voted 5-0 to approve. We now know the senators, delegates, and also our commissioners approve this. I came here today to add the voice of the 27,912. And to that, our majority and our legislators to approve this bill. I'd like to thank our state legislators who set the tone for bipartisanship, and I ask you to move this bill forward. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, and committee members. My name is Susan DeZurek, and I represent Calvert Citizens United. I've previously submitted my written testimony and supporting documents. I'd like to summarize those for you now. House Bill 834, Ethics Consequences of Conflict of Interest Violation Bill, has the unanimous bipartisan support of the Southern Maryland Legislative Delegation and the Calvert County Commissioners. Special thanks to Delegate Fisher and Delegate Morgan and Delegate Long and their staff for their help. In the final minutes of the Calvert County's comprehensive plan adoption process, a county commissioner voted to place two pieces of his own property inside the geographic expansion of a town center. As a result of that vote and the complaints filed afterward, the County Ethics Commission's finding of facts and conclusion report found staggering evidence in relation to the events leading up to the commissioner's vote and concluded that the commissioner had a conflict of interest, knew he had a conflict of interest, and voted anyway. The commission's findings were upheld by the Maryland Court of Special Appeals. Our County Ethics Commission is charged with enforcement of the Ethics Code. Currently, the strongest consequences for violations such as this available to the commission is to issue a letter of censure and a cease and desist order, which they did in this matter. Clearly, the thought of being censured was not enough to deter the commissioner from voting on his own property. Therein lies the need for House Bill 834. Calvert Citizens United and our many supporters of this bill respectfully request that you support the citizens of Calvert County by endorsing House Bill 834. Thank you for your time and consideration of our request.
Mr. Chairman, if I might say, Calvert Citizens United is made up of Democrats and Republicans. It's an interesting organization where everybody agrees, and it's nice to see.
Terrific. Mr. Norris, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Norris, County Attorney for Calvert, here on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners. This was a citizen's request that came into the board and was discussed on October 17th in open session of 2023 of the Board of County. It's again discussed on February 13th of this year, and the county commissioners agreed to support this legislation, this request, because they think whatever necessary and appropriate deterrents there are to protect the public trust should be in place and available to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the sponsor or his panel? I do not see any. So Delegate Fisher, thanks to you and your panel. That concludes the bill hearing on HB 834. We'll now turn to
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Hornberger, HB 774, Motor Vehicle Certificate of Title Fees, Zero Emission Plug-in Electric Drive Vehicles. And Delegate Hornberger, if you have a panel, feel free to bring them up. Well, it looks like you're flying solo on this one.
Yep, just myself. Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, good afternoon, Chair Corman, members of the committee, Vice Chair Boyce. For the record, Delegate Kevin Hornberger, honorary member of the ENT Committee at this point. With 774 Motor Vehicle Certificate of Title Fees, Zero Emission Plug-in Electric Drive Vehicles. This bill is a part of a broader conversation on adequate funding for the Transportation Trust Fund, something we've heard much about this year. specifically by evaluating the vehicle fee parity. EVs do not pay a gas tax, which is a substantial source of funding. Most other cars in Maryland that currently pay. There are parallel conversations happening on this issue with the registration fees and separate other MDOT fees, but this bill deals very narrowly with the titling fee. Under current law, EVs pay $100 titling fee, just like any other vehicle. This bill would raise that to $200. Open to further discussions on what the numbers should look like or suggestions if you're not happy with the 200. And thank you for your consideration of this bill.
Thank you. Questions for this sponsor? Delegate Jacobs, this is a fee bill. You good? This is a fee bill. You're
Yep.
fine? You good? I'm just checking.
This does not impact Corvettes.
All right. I do not see any questions, Delegate Hornberger. So that concludes the bill hearing HB 774. We can roll right into HB 781, Transportation State Highways Rubber Modified Asphalt, and of course, bring up your panel if you have them.
Yeah, so this is a much larger in scope bill. And for the record, Kevin Hornberger here on 774. Oh, sorry, 781. Got so many bills in here, can't keep track of them. State Highway Rubber Modified Asphalt. This bill intends to move the needle on rubber modified asphalt use in the state of Maryland. The genesis of this bill is that in my district, Cecil County, we have 95 bisecting the county, and we're quasi-rural. We have a tremendous amount of scrap tires constantly being dumped. We're, right on the border of Pennsylvania and Delaware, and we don't have the, law enforcement or the capabilities to catch these folks that dump these tires. We also have a tremendous amount of pop-up tire changing venues and businesses. And one of their income models is that they accept tires for $1, $2, $3. They tend to pile these tires up, thousands of them, and then vacate the property, leaving the tires behind. So in seeking a way of what to do with these scrap tires, we came up with this bill. So what this bill does is it takes scrap tires that are currently being three buckets. One is that they go into the landfill currently. This is where all of our scrap tires go, about a third. Another third goes into either ground up or placed on a large barge ship and delivered to another country. I think the biggest buyer right now is India, and they use those in industrial processes. And then the last is that they're incinerated for energy purposes or in waste streams where they're taken out of the landfills. So these are not good ways to use scrap tires, then very detrimental to our environment. What this bill intends to do is to take those dry mix method tires that are ground up and then insert them into the asphalt process, becoming part of the road. And the reason that we're doing that, one, is to get rid of this waste stream, but two, it actually extends the length of the road and cuts down tremendously on cracking. And the way that it does that is because the tire acts as a binder, and it improves the life, the age, and the wearability of the road. I have a subject matter expert here that's going to speak a little bit more to the details. In terms of the fiscal note, the fiscal note covers a wet process as well as the dry process that I just described. However, the wet process that was attempted roughly 25 years ago did not work. It was actually quite catastrophic. It needed higher temps, and it was just a failed method. We are focusing on this bill with the dry method because it's been proven to be very successful. Other states have already incorporated this. It's added to the life of their roads. The cost is not that much different from what you're paying already, and it's extended the life of the road. So that's where we're going with this. We have worked with not only the agency, but also the trade representatives, and we have an amendment for you. You should have that amendment in your system already. And that basically moves this bill to a study. It does a 3-year implementation window, and that allows for testing of this road. We already have a project that's identified in Prince George's County. We have a garage that's looking at this, putting it in. That way we can test the process here. The nature of state highway divisions is that even though it might be successful in another state, they want to do it in this state so that they can use their testing procedures. But we've run the math, and we believe that all of the scrap tires generated in this state could be consumed with this process and with the amount of paving that we do. There's already a processor in the state that creates dry crumb rubber. So if you look at the carbon cycle, it's greatly reduced because logistically everything that goes into this can be done within our state limits. So to me, it's very exciting, from an environmental standpoint. And it's also going to get rid of a waste stream that's currently clogging up our air and our landfills. So with that, I'll turn it over to Red, our subject matter expert. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for having me here today. I am president of Asphalt Plus. We're a leading developer of markets for scrap tire rubber use in asphalt pavements. I've invested a 52-year career in developing functioning markets that change industrial and consumer waste into valuable commodities while reducing the environmental footprint of global manufacturing industries. And I will tell you that I'm so old that I'm glad to be anywhere, but I'm very glad to be here today. Over the past 20 years, we've worked to develop the science and engineering and operational knowledge required to use crumb rubber. We call it ECR, engineered crumb rubber, in asphalt pavements. And these efforts have been successful. We've been paving in the U.S. since 2006. Various state and federal agencies have successfully used this product in their roads. There are a couple of different types of roads, heavy traffic roads. In this particular technology, it will reduce the cost that you're currently paying for these roads while giving you similar or better road life length. It also improves the skid resistance of the roads, and it reduces the noise in the roads, especially of value in urban areas. We get the same benefits in lighter duty roads, but we also have the ability to reduce pavement thickness or extend pavement life significantly. So tire rubber represents an untapped opportunity for a lot of different jurisdictions throughout the United States, and we are turning them on one at a time. At the present, as Representative Hornberger mentioned, more than half of all the tires in the U.S. are currently being burned or disposed of in landfill. And we can use this tire rubber cost effectively to extend the life of your roads, make them safer, et cetera. So we strongly support the goals of this legislation, and I'll be happy to answer questions from the members.
Thank you very much, Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is it Redmond? Sorry.
Yeah, Redmond is red is fine. Thank you.
Just wanted to understand a little bit better. So could you just kind of walk me through what's the difference between crumb rubber asphalt versus sort of the historic process of asphalt? How does it look? How does it go down? What's different about it? That sort of thing.
We add crumb rubber now, just like we would add sand into a mix, only we do it at a different point in the process, lower end of the process where it's not quite so hot. The rubber gets mixed in with the asphalt. It doesn't change any handling characteristic of the asphalt whatsoever. It goes through the plant, lays down, it's compacted just like regular hot mix asphalt. When the material is put down and it cools, the crumbs of rubber in a ton of asphalt will put 100 to 150 million crumbs of rubber in that asphalt. Those individual grains of tires act to pin or deflect cracks as they begin to form in the asphalt, and they significantly slow down the rate which the asphalt is going to crack. They also limit the amount of rutting, and rutting and cracking are what wreck your roads, one or the other or both. This will limit both of them, and it does so at virtually no change in cost to the asphalt pavement.
Okay, you actually answered my next question. So thank you. That was going to be the cost was my next question. So, okay, thank you.
Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Hornberger, for the bill. It's interesting. Can one of you talk a little bit about what other states use crumb rubber in this way on their roadways and how long they've been doing it?
Yes, I can. States have been using this in their pavements since the early 2000s. I can just list states that we're working with that we're paving in right now: Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Illinois, Kentucky, Indiana, Michigan, Georgia, South Carolina, Virginia. And we're in discussion with approximately 10 additional states, obviously including Maryland. We were in discussion with Maryland before this bill was proposed.
Okay, thank you. And then is it the issue of the amendments you talked about, Delegate Hornberger, are you essentially making this a pilot program, would you call it that, where you're trying it out? And why just one roadway? I'm just curious why, unless that's a call by MDOT, why you
Yeah, so
wouldn't try it on 3 or 5 roadways?
Yeah, that was the suggestion of MDOT. They were actually midstream on this process. And this doesn't really bind them in terms of having to, we originally wanted this to go into effect immediately and start paving. Their processes are a lot longer than that. And there is a very small modification that would occur to the production stream. So there's a hopper that has to be installed to insert the crumb rubber. So 3 years is a bit extended, but that's what they asked for. And we're just very happy that MDOT is already pursuing this. This in some way kind of binds them to be steadfast in this process.
Okay. And at the end of the 3 years, what would they do? Would they issue some kind of report, their findings? What would happen?
Yeah, my understanding is that they'll offer a new spec. And that moving forward, all of the roads that they pave would have this process if it checks all the boxes for them in terms of performance. You want to add to that?
Delegate, I think it's very important that we understand that the reason that rubber has not been widely used in the United States up until now has been that it simply costs more than other technologies that also use rubber, but not recycled tire rubber. They use a virgin rubber chemistry to modify their roads, and it's cheaper than old methods for putting crumb rubber into the roads. This dry process method, and there are multiple practitioners out there, was developed to literally control the cost more effectively. And it has taken the original cost of modification down by about 60%. So now there's a cost incentive for DOTs to use this process. Once in the specifications, all of the processors in the state have to comply with low bid requirements in order to win work from the DOT. And if they have a technology that modifies the asphalt in a beneficial way that is permitted under the specifications and it's cheaper, it will be used instead of current existing practice. And that, I think, is the pathway that DOT envisions this technology will enter the market.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr.
Great
Chair.
question.
Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is very interesting. I was wondering if someone is revising the design standard, engineering design standards to incorporate this product, because you mentioned that the thicknesses of roadways would be less, but in engineering design standards, the cross sections of every plan has those specific depths,
Yeah.
So is the process being started, and to whom is it going to, et cetera?
Separate from any individual state effort, we are in the early stages of negotiating specifications through ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineers, and AASHTO, and we're working to create a standard that would be available for all states. The challenge is that you need to have sufficient data in order to qualify to get those specifications. We've got about 10 million tons on the ground right now, and we're approaching 20 years of experience. And so a number of different attributes of this technology would be included in that sort of a specification, which would include then the opportunity to simply cite that specification in state specs in order to allow access to that technology and that information. So the short answer is yes, we're working on it, and that's going in parallel with each state's adoption of this technology.
So the ASCE part, I think, is important.
I'm sorry, ASTM. I beg your pardon. We just pay for ASCE. So American Society of Testing Materials. I'm sorry.
Okay, I thought you were talking about the Professional Engineer Society. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Thank you for bringing this bill. Delegate, I don't seem to have your amendment in my file. Could you send that, please?
Yeah, I'll have the staff email it out if you don't have it in there.
Great.
I think the amendment we had a meeting yesterday with all of the players, and this amendment was a result of that. including the MDOT. So I think it was past the data uploaded to the testimony, but we'll
Yeah.
email it to your offices. Thank you.
Thank you. One more question, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Have you talked to, I understand that you've been working with MDE. Have you talked to, with MDOT? Have you talked to MDE because they have a scrap tire program?
No, not directly into this bill, but what I will say Maryland does a very good job of managing tires. Unfortunately, they end up being ground, placed on a ship, and gone someplace else to be incinerated. So we control the process, not really from cradle to grave, but right up until that last step. And then after that last step, it goes and does something that's very unenvironmentally friendly and not sound. So that's why the definitions in this bill are so important, because if you don't specify that it's scrap tire dry crumb rubber, virgin rubber materials will be incorporated into the process because they can be obtained somewhat cheaper. And then we won't deal with that waste stream of the tires. So, but yeah, we can definitely engage MDE as well in this process to make sure that those tires are in fact going into the dry crumb process and then being placed in the roads. Do you want to add to that?
We've already reached out to the agency. I'm a former director of an environmental program for another state, and so I understand the importance of these agencies and their role in this process. We've already reached out here in Maryland to the Department of Environment. Unfortunately, the director of the scrap tire program has been out of commission for the past few weeks because of some knee surgery, and I'm expecting that we will have a dialogue with them. We routinely work with these state agencies to provide equipment infrastructure support, sometimes out of tire funds themselves, in order to accelerate the adoption of this technology and the reuse of rubber in the roads. Their incentive is not only to see the tires getting reused, they also recognize that if we can extend the length of road life, we're going to be mining less and we're going to be transporting and processing less in the state, which is going to further reduce impact on the environment. As a matter of fact, national studies that are going on right now for the asphalt pavement industry indicate that the most important thing that the industry can do to reduce its environmental impact from all of its operations, the single most important thing is to extend the life of the pavement. And so that's where I think there's going to be a great deal of focus in the next 5 to 10 years for this industry, and where tire rubber obviously has got a role to play.
Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Redmond, we've had discussions in this committee for years about the recycling of synthetic turf. And part of that process is recycled tires. Would that be a possible use? Synthetic turf fields that when they've been seen their life and then they go through the recycle stage?
You are asking part of an enormous question that we are facing right now in the US and worldwide, and that is, what do we do with plastic material? Tire rubber is a very specialized plastic material. It's pretty consistent in its quality from year to year. It has certain elastic characteristics that make it really well suited for asphalt. The plastics industry, which would include, I would include carpet, leftover carpet, astroturf, et cetera. The plastics industry is desperately trying to find homes for their plastic that would be considered viable recycling options. Use in the roads is certainly being very carefully looked at right now. I would say that they're 10 to 15 years behind tire rubber, simply because they started researching simply at a later date. So I think that the jury is out in the paving community, and it's going to take us another 5 to 10 years to figure out whether they can in fact use these materials in the pavements directly. Underneath the synthetic turf, where they have a soil that has been amended with crumb rubber or layers of crumb rubber, if you can pick the crumb rubber up and simply remove the dirt from it, all of that crumb rubber can be used in this process.
Thank you.
Delegate Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. You'd been referencing about the extended life of the roadways by going through this process.
Yes.
Do you have any information on extending the life of tires on my vehicle, in particular electric vehicles? And also, where can we go visit somewhere close by to see one of these roads that have already used this material?
I'd be happy to arrange for a visit if, we can find roads. I'm thinking the closest roads are going to be probably somewhere in the area of 100 miles from here. But yes, there are roads that we could certainly get you to. In answer to your second question.
Referenced Virginia.
Yes, yes. In answer to your first question about tire longevity, clearly part of the challenge in the tire community is to extend the life of tires. And of course, there's a competing force of losing profit margin in doing so. I can't address that, but what I can tell you is that with electric vehicles, you have such an increase in acceleration and torque that you are burning through tires at a rate that can be as much as, this is the outer edge, 80% sooner than standard tires on fuel powered vehicles. And that is just simply because of the design of the electrical motor setup that they have in the cars. So the wheels are spinning or gripping much more aggressively than before, and they tend to wear out sooner. The industry is aware that electric cars are wearing out those tires sooner. I have not heard of any variation in tire design yet that would be involved. It will probably involve the use of more natural rubber in the tires, which will make them much more like truck tires in their ability to extend for additional pavement life. So right now for us, when the rest of us folks buy a set of tires at the far end of the life is about 80,000 miles. And with electric vehicles, that might be 55,000 miles for the same set of tires. If you can boost the amount of natural rubber in those tires to get it up to 100 or 120,000 miles on a regular car, then an electric car is going to get up into that 80,000 mile range. And I think that's sort of the first option for the tire industry to adjust. I'm not selling tires today, so I'm trying to take them in, if you will.
Right. He's buying, not selling.
Well, I was just hopeful that you had an answer on the extending the life of tires, and I can only afford 40,000 mile tires. Thank you.
Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate, I've got a couple questions. First, did you say that State Highways is good with your amendment?
Yeah, they met with us earlier this week and they helped craft the amendment.
Okay, great. Second question, related to fire risk of using, concentrated amounts of rubber tires, is, are precautions taken to avoid the, the fact that when fire does break out with rubber as a fuel, that it becomes much more difficult to deal with?
Yes, I can answer that. The answer to your question is two parts. First off, the fire hazard with tires is when they are whole tires, not when they have been processed. So when you're talking about large piles of individual scrap tires, once a fire gets started, it typically will take months to put that kind of a fire out. The Department of Environment can certainly address this directly with the committee, but they have standards in place that only allow the accumulation of certain amounts of tires in order to reduce the risk of having some kind of a large fire that gets started in a big tire pile. Once the material has been reduced in size to either chips or crumb, bags of crumb rubber literally can't burn because they're just basically a cube of rubber with no oxygen in between the individual grains. And so when a fire starts in a tire plant, the edges of the rubber will burn, but it can't really get down into the core of the bag or the pile of crumb rubber itself. And so they tend to be significantly less flammable. So the risk again is the individual whole tires. The more markets we create for scrap tires, the less time we have whole tires sitting in an unprocessed state. And so, again, part of the goal here is to eliminate some of those risks by making the markets for scrap tires more viable here in the state.
Okay, thank you.
I do not see any further.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Vice Chair. Go ahead. Vice Chair Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you. And first of all, I want to say, Delegate Hornberger, I love a reuse purpose for anything. And this sounds pretty amazing. And just to clarify, you've met with all of the unfavorable testimony folks, and they are okay with this study.
With the amendment.
With the amendment. Two, I wanted to clarify just quickly states. You said Texas, Ohio, Missouri, Michigan, Georgia, South Carolina, Virginia, and you mentioned two others. as far as other states using this?
Okay, states, I was asked, I think, what states we have paved in.
Yes,
and,
mhm.
I can just run the list back. I'm not sure which one you missed, but Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Illinois,
Illinois.
Indiana, and it's Illinois, not Illinois, because I came from there once.
Illinois, I gotta.
And Kentucky, Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia.
Yep.
And I forgot Alabama. Alabama is using it only in a test track.
Okay,
And
thank
I
you so
think-
much.
I think there's also cases in Canada that have utilized this.
Okay. And then the other question I wanted to clarify was the cost. I thought at first you said the crumble rubber was cheaper to purchase than virgin rubber, but you're saying virgin rubber is cheaper to purchase than the recycled crumble.
Thank you. That's an important distinction. Let me try to explain. When you modify asphalt,
Sure.
you're going to put rubber into the binder, the liquid cement, or you're going to put it into the mix. When you put it into the liquid cement, the primary process that is being used right now uses a virgin rubber chemistry.
Got it.
That modified binder is more expensive than adding an engineered crumb rubber product into the mix. Okay, so in all of the roads that the DOT is managing right now, you've got heavy traffic roads and they use these modified products right now. They could use crumb rubber dry process today if they wanted to, okay, and they would reduce their costs. The testimony that was given by MDOT reflects economic costs that are about 10 years old and do not reflect dry process rubber.
Sure.
In these heavy traffic roads, dry process rubber will reduce the cost of the mix. It will not increase the cost of the mix. It will reduce it by typically 3 to 5%. That's an estimate ballpark figure. In other roads in the state, which use unmodified hot mix, there is no rubber being used in those pavements. If we put rubber in those pavements, it will increase the cost of those pavements by about 3 to 4% or less, depending on the level of change they want. But it will extend the life of the roads.
Got it.
So we have two different cases, if you will, that we need to consider. One where it's immediately cheaper, and in the other, it's cheaper because it's going to extend the life of the road.
Understood. And then the last question is, you mentioned a meeting with MDE. Does your company or companies like yours, in places where maybe folks, the department is not ready for this type of technology, would you then be buying tires from those particular states or jurisdictions that have maybe a lot of tires and then use in your production?
We process crumb rubber at multiple locations all over the world right now.
Sure.
So we have multiple locations in the US that will be taking tires from different states, bringing them in, processing them, and then we sell the finished product. So we will
So I'm
buy.
just saying the state could potentially sell their tires to whatever type of companies that do this.
Yes.
Right. That's
There's
correct.
there's
Yes.
currently a crumb rubber processor in Maryland, and I think they provided written support.
Okay.
in
I was
the
just asking because
testimony.
you made it seem like there would be well, Delegate Hornberger, you made it a point about us burning or throwing away or shipping out tires when so it sounds like you were saying there's potential business in the state.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I do not see any further questions. There are some other favorable witnesses. I'm not sure if they're here. Delegate Hornberger, Sean Moore from U.S. Tire Manufacturers Association, and Kenneth Curtin, Liberty Tire Recycling.
Come out there and come on up. Great. Thanks for coming.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Sean Moore. I'm here today on behalf of the U.S. Tire Manufacturers Association in support of House Bill 781. I just want to start by saying it's always a pleasure to appear before my home state's legislature. I grew up in Delegate Foley's district. My wife was an MCPS teacher for nearly a decade in the 16th district, and now raising my family in Delegate Vaughn's district. So I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you all today. US2MA represents the 12 major companies making tires here in the United States. Our members account for about 83% of the 325 million tires that were sold in the US last year. tire manufacturing directly supports about 2,900 Maryland jobs, contributes more than $529 million annually to the state's economy, and generates more than $94 million a year in state and local tax revenue for Maryland. I did submit written testimony. It's quite detailed. I think a lot of the questions that have been asked are also answered in there. Particularly, I'd like to echo Dr. Clark's comments about using life cycle cost analysis because, you know, as rubber modified asphalt can extend the life of the pavement, it also reduces the frequency or the need for maintenance and replacement of the asphalt. And the nice thing about rubber modified asphalt too is it can be stripped up off the road at the end of its life and recycled back into the next mix of asphalt. So it's a very circular market that permanently delays or permanently avoids landfilling or any sort of need to dispose of rubber in a different way. I would also note that my testimony on pages 6 and 7 discusses the life cycle costs a little more. I think one of the first few pages has a map of all the various states using rubber modified asphalt, and then states where the rubber modified asphalt is included in the specifications put out by the State Highway Administration. So I would note that our neighbors to the north in Pennsylvania and our neighbors to the south, as you heard before, in Virginia, are both using rubber modified asphalt and have been doing so for several years. It has safety benefits, economic benefits, and environmental benefits that my testimony goes into in further detail. And certainly appreciate your time today. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. My hope is that we can expand this discussion to eliminate barriers that counties and local governments might have to adopting rubber modified asphalt too. And I think its use is appropriate on those roads beyond just those that are controlled by the state. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the committee. My name is Stratton Curtin. That's my middle name. Sorry, what I go by. I'm Vice President of Government Affairs at Liberty Tire Recycling, which is the leading tire collector, processor, and recycler in North America, both the US and Canada. I'm also a proud resident of Montgomery County. So I'm here to talk about ways that Maryland can look at rubber modified asphalt as a way to make our roads more sustainable. And one of the things I would note is nationwide, I can't speak to the numbers specifically in Maryland, but the industry's made a lot of progress. The recycling and recovery rate is over 70%. More than half of that is actually material recycling. So it's not just waste, energy recycling. But if you think about the US producing over 300 million tires every single year, just in passenger tires alone, that means that 30% represents a huge number of tires right now that don't have a home. And we see rubber modified asphalt as a key component of getting every tire into a reuse scenario. So I'm happy to answer questions on anything rubber modified asphalt related, but I'm going to try to limit myself to 2 quick points. One, innovation in mixes, as Red already covered. You know, traditional mixes for rubber modified asphalt require blending equipment, extra heating, agitation, storage tanks. However, there is another way. We as a company produce a mix that uses the dry process called Smart Mix, which is produced so that the rubber can simply be incorporated into the asphalt mixture at the mix plant. It does not require the additional binders, higher mixing temperatures, long mixing times, or long storage times. And on the other point I'd like to add is performance in all climates. Rubber modified asphalt performs well in hot, cold, and temperate climates. And in fact, rubber as an additive actually improves the performance of asphalt at extreme temperatures. Asphalt typically has a range of 90 degrees Celsius before it fails under extreme heat or cold, whereas rubber has a 148-degree temperature difference. And when you add it as a modifier, that rubber actually conveys some of that to the asphalt, allowing it to perform better under extreme. Thank you for your time. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you said currently 70% of tires are being recycled. Did I get that right?
Either recycled or secondary use.
What is secondary use?
So tire derived fuels, which Red and the delegate were mentioning.
Oh, sorry, say that again.
Tire derived fuels, for instance,
Oh, fuels.
where they're used for a cement kiln. So I would distinguish that as a secondary use versus a recycled use.
Okay, and so when they're actually recycled, what are they recycled into, or how is that?
Anything from what we call tire derived aggregate, which is typically used in infrastructure products, to crumb rubber, which is basically, think of it, I know we're familiar with it in fields, but it's actually a feedstock, so it can be used in molded goods. So for instance, we make, rubber tiles or garden liners from molded goods. And then all the way up to, inputs in rubber modified asphalt. There's some in the industry that are using it for what's called carbon black recovery, which is trying to unlock that true circularity where you can recover elements of the tires that go into new tires. So there's a wide range is the short version, I guess.
Okay, and so the 30% that are not recycled, do those get incinerated or landfilled?
Those are, I believe, typically landfilled.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions, Delegate Vice Chair Boyce, excuse me.
Thank you so much. I had a question that just popped in my head, and you talked about the higher heat. How does that affect, I guess, heat in general? A black top with the tire bits, does that create more of a kind of like a heat island or a heat effect by any chance?
The reflectivity of asphalt pavements with rubber in them is marginally lower than the reflectivity of asphalt pavements.
Okay.
Particularly in areas with very intense sunlight where an unmodified pavement will bleach itself white very quickly, whereas a rubberized pavement will stay darker longer. The trade-off here is that if the pavement stays darker longer, it's going to crack much more slowly than something that bleaches white. So there's a very small trade-off, and I'm thinking somewhere in the area of maybe 0.5% of albedo or reflectivity change in a rubberized versus a non-rubberized pavement. Very little change to the urban heat island effect that I think you're referring to.
Sure.
But other than that, no material change in the thermal characteristics of the pavement.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, I do not see any further questions, so thank you. We do have one witness listed as unfavorable, though perhaps that changes with the amendment. Tim Smith from the Maryland Asphalt Association. Come on up.
And Mr. Chair, the amendment's been emailed to your accounts
Thank you.
by my staff. Thank you.
Tim, good to see you in your new role.
Good to see you.
Any comments on the pitching situation before you get started?
Just because it's spring training, let's go O's. Okay. So good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the committee. My name is Tim Smith, President of the Maryland Asphalt Association. Our association represents 48 plants across Maryland, comprised of 19 producers and approximately 100 contractors and associate members that employ thousands of employees across the state. We are not supportive of a legislatively mandating engineering decisions or material selections. We recommend those decisions be left up to our state experts. Asphalt is the most recycled product in the transportation industry. 100% of the product we put out there today can be recycled. And if you look at state highways now, roughly 25% of the roadways that we're putting down now are recycled. So any new asphalt mix that's placed roughly has 25% recycled asphalt in it. Nationally, we're also looking at a road forward vision for our asphalt industry to look to achieve net zero carbon emissions, and all that progress, the 25%, looking at emissions, looking at other recycled products, has all been done without legislation. We're very much interested in deploying the increased use of potentially the engineered crumb rubber, as well as other recycled materials to further reduce our carbon footprint. Happy to partner with MDOT as well as our other stakeholders to move the crumb tire rubber industry forward. We are supportive of the amendment to pivot to an approach to gather the facts that allow MDOT to make more informed engineering and material selection decisions. In closing, our asphalt industry has clearly shown the character to embrace new beneficial ideas through recycling without mandates, and see no reason for this to not to continue with this particular product. Thank you for allowing me a chance to speak today.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the bill hearing on HB 781. We'll now turn to HB 913. Our friend Fraser Hidalgo, motor vehicles registration annual surcharge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair. It's great to be back. I am here today presenting House Bill 913. I hope for a favorable report. House Bill 913 is some time in coming. For those of you that are familiar, we have made an active role of promoting electric vehicles in this state and the adoption of electric vehicles. And currently, as of just a few days ago, we have 95,233 registered electric vehicles in the state of Maryland, which is incredible because I remember when we first started working on this policy, I remember when it was 3,000 vehicles, and then it was 6,000 vehicles, and then it got to 36,000 vehicles. I just have these little numbers in my head. So for us to be approaching 100,000 electric vehicles is amazing. That's still a fraction of the number of vehicles on the road. We have about 4.5 million vehicles totally registered in the state of Maryland, but we're getting there. So the point of this bill is that all the other ICE vehicles that are on the roadways are actually paying the motor fuel tax. So they're paying for the upkeep of the roads, which is great. And one of the advantages for electric vehicles is that they're not buying gas, which means they're not polluting the air, which means they're not contributing to greenhouse gas emissions, which is all wonderful. But it also means that we are in a situation where they're also not contributing to the upkeep of the roadways. So what this bill does is it provides that when you register your vehicle and then every year thereafter, you will pay, if you drive an electric vehicle, $100 a year to help with the upkeeping of the roadways, which I don't think you're going to get a lot of pushback on the electric vehicle community. I think that for the most part, they understand that they need to pay their way. But I choose my words carefully when I say they need to pay their way, specifically on the upkeep of the roadway, of the asphalt of the roads. That's where they need to pay their way because they're already paying their way. So I think this part of the bill is probably not that controversial. I think those 95, 97, 100, 120,000 electric vehicle owners are okay with this for the most part. The little kicker part of this bill that might be slightly more controversial is an attempt to level the playing field. A couple of things have happened. One, the train report came out that made a recommendation similar to the one you see before you. And also the Department of the Environment came out with some recommendations. And the recommendations from the Department of the Environment is in order to balance this out, that we should also charge internal combustion engines, otherwise known as gas vehicles, diesel vehicles, for their contribution to greenhouse gas emissions and pollution, which we're not currently charging. So with that said, there is a piece of the bill that requires $75 a year for gas or, again, ICE vehicles to contribute to dealing with the environmental issues that are caused by the burning of said fuels. That's probably slightly more controversial than the other piece. I will say that in a point of time where we have significant concerns when it comes to funding our transportation infrastructure, this would add a significant amount of money. You can see the fiscal report, but it's in the order of millions and millions of dollars for electric vehicles and hundreds of millions of dollars in the order for ICE vehicles. So I think that's the crux of the bill. I am happy to take questions. I just want to remind everyone that I think it's on page 78 of the Secretary, the Department of Environment's report. This actual recommendation is coming from the Department of the Environment.
Thank you, Delegate Fraser Hidalgo. Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this bill, Delegate. Just a quick question. Since you were talking about the environmental impact of different types of cars, do electric vehicles burn tires faster than internal combustion engine vehicles?
Yes, they do, on the order of magnitude, apples to apples every day, not talking about cars on a drag strip or cars doing street racing. It's about 20%.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Delegate Ruth, for your question. I really appreciate it.
Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this bill, Delegate. How did you arrive at the $100 and $75?
That is a great question. So the train report recommended somewhere between 200 and 250.
But I had concerns with that because there are a lot of folks that are stretching and they spend extra money to buy an electric vehicle, especially those folks that may be retired and they buy one vehicle, they buy an electric vehicle, they're super excited about it. And because they're retired, they maybe drive 1,500 or 2,000 miles a year. So in my head, I thought that $200 to $250 general recommendation. Further in the train report, it does say that there should be a conversation about it. It doesn't strictly recommend that. It just says that would be the replacement cost if they were buying gasoline. And I just thought that was probably a little bit more fair. There are other states, for example, Missouri, California, North Carolina, and Georgia that also do this, and they range from between $205 to $213 a year. I will also say that there were many conversations that were had about vehicle miles traveled, which I think would ultimately be the fairest way of dealing with this with all vehicles. Unfortunately, tracking, reporting, and trying to figure out vehicle miles traveled would be something that I think that the chair and vice chair of this committee probably would end up having to put together some kind of intensive work group to figure out how you actually do that. And the reason I say that is because there are a lot of interests. There are other interests, perhaps privacy interests about how you're tracking someone's mileage, data privacy related issues. I know there are other folks on this committee that would have those concerns. So that's how I came to that number.
Okay, thank you. Can I have
Sure.
a follow-up, Mr. Chair? And the $75, because it seems like there's not, so I don't want to argue for gasoline powered vehicles, but if this is about the highway fund, if I'm driving a non-EV, I'm also paying gas tax. And so I'm wondering how you came up with 75 versus 100. That doesn't seem to be, it seems like if I'm paying the gas tax, that maybe that should be lower if $100 is fair for someone who isn't paying the gas.
Yeah,
tax.
I agree with you, which is why I came up with the number 75 as opposed to the number 100.
Okay.
Are you suggesting that the number should be less than 75?
I'm asking whether or not the number should be less than 75.
So
Because let me also finish, because the other thing is that, as you just said, so most people that have an EV, that isn't their only vehicle. So chances are their other vehicle is some sort of gasoline powered vehicle.
that's correct. I agree with that. Absolutely.
So you're really talking about, I think it's kind of a disincentive in some respect. I mean, I'm not sure what you're trying to do with the $75. I guess that's where I'm getting. I'm not sure what you're trying to do.
So if you go and I can give it to you here, I can actually read it to you. On page 78 of the Department of Environment's mitigation, it says pollution fees on fuel burning vehicles require owners of fuel burning vehicles to pay pollution mitigation fee during vehicle registration. If the state decides to increase registration fees for EVs, which the state is currently considering because EV drivers do not pay motor fuel tax that currently fund road maintenance projects, then the fee increase on fuel burning vehicles should be at least as much as the fee to increase on EVs. Essentially, this has to do with pollution, which electric vehicles pay more to purchase their vehicle and they don't pollute versus EVs, which the motor fuel tax is strictly for the roadway. It doesn't have anything to do with environmental issues. And if we're going to meet our environmental goals, then we need to come up with revenue to do so. And also it helps to encourage people when they take in the total cost of ownership, then when you look at the total cost of ownership of an ICE vehicle versus an electric vehicle, when you look at the total cost, you will see why people are moving to EVs, because the total cost of ownership is significantly less. So this is also a little bit of a carrot and a stick.
And one more question, sorry, and then I'll shut up. Would under which category would, for example, plug-in hybrids fall into?
I didn't, they would just be considered EVs. I did not break them out. I will say this, which I was going to say a minute ago on your earlier question, Delegate Foley. I've been around here long enough to know, and in this committee long enough to know that this bill, as of in a minute or two when the questions are finished, is no longer the ownership of myself. This bill belongs to this committee. The bill belongs to the subcommittee and the work that is going to be done thereafter. With that said, if the $75 fee is concerning to you, because I just made that up in my head, that is totally reasonable. I would suggest that you work and try to figure out something that the committee, that the chair, the vice chair, everybody in the committee can agree with. I am by no means wed to that number. I'm just trying to find some kind of equitable numbers. I am, however, again, not going to be my bill, but I am kind of wed to the $100 number. I would be very concerned if it went above $100 for EVs, just because of the what I've already stipulated in my testimony.
Okay, and just to be clear, you said hybrids would fall under the $100. Okay, thank you.
Again,
Okay.
property of the committee, so I'm not necessarily wed to it.
Delegate Ziegler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for this bill. I think it's a great idea. I'm just curious if you ever thought about just hooking it to the registration. So it comes every 2 years and you're not adding another bill and interaction with MVA and whatever else.
Absolutely. And there was that conversation, just the idea of the typical, I think it's $187 every 2 years, and then adding 200 to it, making it almost 400 seemed a little bit more challenging. It could be more challenging for some folks than just having $100 a year. But again, these are questions that I think that you all can decide. A lot of this EV stuff, as I've said in my prior bill, which you just saw, but before the end of the bill hearing, I thought we had another couple of weeks on money for incentives, and they're gone. So, I mean, this is a very big moving target because the market is moving so quickly, technology is moving so quickly, infrastructure is moving so quickly. So a lot of this is not, a lot of this is you kind of looking at the data that you have at that exact time and then making adjustments to that data. Thank you, Delegate.
Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Frazier Hidalgo. It's always good to see you. My question is similar to Delegate Foley's in that at a glance, the bill does not seem to address hybrids at all. She made a point of saying plug-in hybrids, but how would you treat them? Speaking of the cost of EVs, some of us have kids in college and EVs are not really still affordable for us. And I remember posing this question when you were renewing the tax credit for EVs and saying, but what about hybrids? And you said, no, it's time to move, fully ahead toward EVs. We should not still be, encouraging hybrids. So
what I would say to you is that if you're talking about strictly hybrid vehicles, they are paying a motor fuel tax, right? So I guess that's probably your point. They are paying a motor fuel tax. But as time goes on, the cars are becoming more and more efficient. So hybrids are buying less gas, as are almost all the cars with CAFE standards. They're all paying less. So the motor fuel tax and the deficits that we have when it comes to repairing our roadways aren't limited. They're not the sole source of this. Isn't simply us as a policy moving to EVs. It's also cars becoming more energy efficient, cars using less gasoline, people being more thoughtful, people zooming from home as opposed to getting in their car and driving to work all the time. So there are a number of factors that I think that are pushing this. But as far as hybrids themselves, hybrids are paying less in gas tax, motor fuel tax, because they're more energy efficient. For example, a Prius might go 55 miles per gallon or 60 miles per gallon. Mm-hmm. And on plugins, it's the same thing. So they're doing a little bit of both. Plug-in hybrids, they're doing a little both. So they are paying the motor fuel tax to some degree, not paying as much. So again, I would say a little bit, one of the new terms that I learned in ECM that was not a term used in this committee, but I think people will get it, especially the chair, although it's not a baseball term, it's a basketball term, I think. It's they on ECM, we call it like jump ball, which kind of means like you guys work out like how exactly you want that little piece to go. And that's what we refer to it in ECM. It's a new term. I just learned it last year. I think it's a basketball term.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure about your sports analogy, but I'm getting lost at all that. But I will just say, I do not have the good fortune of serving on the motor vehicle subcommittee, so I'm not going to be able to touch this really again.
You will.
I do want to understand where, I guess I didn't pose the question clearly enough. Where do plug-in hybrids or any hybrids fit in between your $75 and your $100? What would they pay?
They would pay $100.
Okay, well, I would take issue with that.
Well, you know what, and again, to what I said, like, well, I'll leave it what I said about how you can work. Again, these are moving targets. And so I hate to do that because I feel very bad coming with a bill that has some moving targets in it. But the simple fact of the matter is that, you know, throughout the years, whenever we've done these incentive bills, we were making adjustments to these incentive bills, all of this EV stuff, all the way up until the day before the floor, sometimes on the floor because it's moving so quickly.
Thank you.
Great. I think you've really hit a home run with this bill, Delegate. I do have a question, though. I do have a question. You've talked about the money going to the roads and stuff. I just want to be clear. Under your bill, it just goes in the Transportation Trust Fund like other registration fees, titling fees.
The ICE part goes into the Transportation Trust Fund.
Okay. Where does the other part go?
The EV part goes to the Transportation Trust Fund as well, but it's supposed to be used specifically for EV promotion, development, infrastructure. If you look at the fiscal note, it's a fraction of the cost of the ICE part. But again, Mr. Chair, some conversation we've had, that's kind of the will of the committee. So.
Got it. We call the balls and strikes on this committee.
You call the balls and
Okay.
strikes on it.
All right.
And if I just whiffed that, then that's okay. I'm okay with that.
Nice. All right. I think we've beaten that to death. Delegate Stewart? Is that, oh, I'm sorry, Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Delegate Frazier Doggo, thank you for bringing this bill. I'm a co-sponsor, so I really like it. And just to follow up on the discussion we had with the chair, I mean, the revenue that's brought in is considerable, and between the direct revenue and the bonding potential of that revenue, it could make a significant dent in our transportation deficit, I guess. Isn't that so?
That is absolutely so. And also, I mean, even if you took that ICE charge and halved it, or you did something that made the committee more comfortable, you're still looking at millions for transportation and road issues at a point when we all know that that is one of the biggest holes in our $750 million budget shortfall.
Any further questions? Okay. Thank you, Delegate Frazier. Great to have you back in ENT.
Thank you.
That concludes the bill hearing on HB 913. We'll now turn to our own Delegate Jeff Long, HB 737, vehicle laws, slow moving vehicles, right hand lane.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, my fellow members of the committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Jeffrey E. Long Jr., District 27B, Calvert and Prince George's County, and I'm here to ask for a favorable report on House Bill 737. You have my written testimony, but currently under state law, any vehicle that is driving under the speed limit or not going in the flow of current normal traffic in a rural area is generally required to travel in the right-hand lane or lane solely on certain highways designated as a rural area. This bill is very simple, and it would seek to repeal that provision and would apply it to any state highway, any roadway, as well as then require the placement of signs on the side of the highway encouraging drivers to move to the right lane when traveling below that speed. And there are several of our colleagues from rural areas, Southern Maryland, and even other jurisdictions in Baltimore City, which have requested that be granted. And so with that, I would entertain any questions and will ask for a favorable report of this committee.
Thank you, Delegate Long. Delegate Ruth has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Long. I just wondered if you could briefly explain the reasons why you brought this bill forward.
Sure. I will say that in certain jurisdictions, in certain areas, not just with respect to rural areas, there are individuals that can sometimes hinder the flow of traffic. And of course, there are no citations, there are no fines that would be applied or applicable in this instance. It's just a matter of encouraging. But again, it would just help not with just rural areas, but with more urban, densely populated areas as well, too. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay. Thank you, Delegate Long. Very efficient bill hearing. We will go to HB 750, Delegate Ziegler, vehicle laws, damaged, obscured, or modified registration plates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I was going to say I was going to do some speed sponsoring, but I cannot beat that. So I will do my best. Thank you, Vice Chair Boyce, members of the committee. I'm here for the record, Natalie Ziegler, here to present House Bill 750, addressing damaged, obscured, or modified vehicle license plates. So in current law, it is illegal to intentionally modify or obscure your license plate so that it can't be read. All this bill really does is to take out the idea of intent so that you have to have a license plate and it has to be legible. And it's your responsibility to make sure that it is legible. And this is actually a pretty big issue. MDOT reported that in 2023, there were 380,491 obstructed plates, which poses challenges for law enforcement for speed cameras, for red light violators, for charging tolls for people who don't have an easy pass, for solving hit and run accidents, for tracking down gas station pump and run perpetrators, finding suspects with outstanding warrants, and locating missing persons through the amber and silver alerts. So it's actually a fairly big problem. And as the bill is written, it would offer motorists first a warning and then 3 points on the license. But that's something that, as Delegate Fraser Hidalgo said, this belongs to the committee. So we can take a look at that with the experts on my subcommittee. And it is a secondary violation. So law enforcement can't pull you over just for having an obscured license plate. They would have to pull you over for something else first, and then they could also get you on that. I should say that I have a sponsor amendment which addresses the concerns in the MDOT testimony. So I ask for a favorable report and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Delegate Ziegler. I'm just looking around for any questions and do not see any. So almost as efficient as Delegate Long.
Great.
Thank you
Thank
for the
you
bill.
very much.
That concludes the bill hearing on HB 750. We'll now turn, is Delegate Ivy here? Yep, there he is. HB 449, Comprehensive Flood Management Grant Program, funding for underserved and overburdened communities.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you mind if I bring up?
Please do.
Thank you. Wonderful. Chairman Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, members of the House Environment and Transportation Committee. For the record, Delegate Ivy here to present House Bill 449. This piece of legislation passed the House last year. I sent an amendment around, I believe it was yesterday. And what that amendment would do is just put this bill in the posture that it passed the House in last year. It's an important piece of legislation. As amended, it would authorize, it doesn't force the governor's hand, but it does allow him to provide up to $20 million beginning in fiscal year 2026 for the Comprehensive Flood Management Grant Program. Really, the important part about this bill, one of the important parts, is that it does require that 40% of the funding that goes into this program be used in underserved and overburdened communities. It's an equity bill, quite frankly. And so I've got individuals here that are willing to speak to how this bill impacts their organization specifically. But I really look at it as a cleanup bill because we all have the intent that when we create funds like these to distribute them in a fair and equitable manner. So I'm asking for a favorable report on House Bill 449. It was cross-filed by Senator Alonzo Washington, who just recently had his bill hearing as well. Thank you. Rebecca, if you'd like to go.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Rebecca Rear, and I'm the Director of Climate Policy and Justice at the Maryland League of Conservation Voters, here in support of HB 449 with the sponsor amendments being offered. Thank you, Delegate Ivy, for introducing this legislation. I just want to quote the Maryland Department of the Environment's website on the Comprehensive Flood Management Grant Program. With climate change resulting in more frequent and intense storms in Maryland, the Comprehensive Flood Management Grant Program is more relevant now than ever. This is why we support increasing funding to the program while allocating funding to overburdened or underserved communities through the application of Justice 40. We have submitted written testimony with a number of sign-ons as well. Thank you for your consideration, and we urge a favorable report.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the committee. My name is Jose Coronado Flores, and I'm a policy analyst with the organization CASA, and we're here to offer favorable testimony. In particular, we'd like to see this bill pass because our members live in the communities that are oftentimes suffering a lot of damages from flooding, and it happens really quickly. I want to illustrate this by uplifting a member story. Oscar Rojas resides in Riverdale, a community that is not only overburdened and underserved, which would trigger the EJ component of it. And he lives right next to the Anacostia River. In 2021 and in 2022, Oscar, his wife, and 4-year-old daughter experienced 2 years of back-to-back devastating flooding, and much of his family's belongings were destroyed. He was forced to rebuild not once, but twice. And low-income families across the state have more to lose and less wealth to rebuild. I also want to point to Rock Creek Wood Apartments in Rockville, which is a community that is notorious for severe flooding. In 2021, an individual actually passed away and 150 tenants were displaced due to sudden flash flooding. Property damages, loss of valuables, and the trauma evoked by these events add to the reasons why communities like Rock Creek Wood really and desperately need better flood management. And just to point to the census tract, the community there is 40% low income and resides in a floodplain. With rain and severe weather only intensifying and occurring more frequently, without action and more funds, our most vulnerable communities are going to keep suffering. For these reasons, CASA urges a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Paul Ellington. I'm here representing Worcester County, Crisfield, and Cambridge. In Worcester County, we have Pocomoke City, which is a majority minority community, and as is Crisfield and Somerset and Cambridge and Dorchester. Any of y'all that went to the Talls Clam Bake, you see the results of coastal flooding. And on the Eastern Shore, it doesn't have to even be raining. It can be windy, there could be an offshore nor'easter, and Crisfield's underwater, as Delegate Otto will tell you. So I appreciate the opportunity, and respect to your time, I'll be brief, and thank you for your support for this bill.
Delegate Ivey, you want me to bring your two mayors on before we do questions? Are they part of your panel? You have two virtual witnesses?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Great. We can bring up Mayor Benitez, City of Mount Rainier. Please go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to be very brief because we're a little bit under the weather, but I'm here in support for HB 449. And thank you, Delegate Ivey, for making sure that this is up there. City of Mount Rainier, heavily affected with flooding, just as well as the other cities. You know, the city does as much as it can, but the needs far exceed that, what we can do as well. So on behalf of the City of Mount Rainier, I ask for your favorable support. And also the Prince George's County Municipal Association, 27 strong municipalities are also asking for available support on HB 449. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Lilly.
Yes, good afternoon, honorable members of the House Environment Transportation Committee. I'm here on behalf of the town of Forest Heights to express our strong support for House Bill 449. It proposes the establishment of this flood management grant program, which we believe will be very, very beneficial. In Forest Heights, the threat of flooding is not just a distant possibility, but it's a significant and growing concern that threatens our community safety, economic stability, and overall quality of life. The risk of flooding over the next 30 years is alarmingly high in Forest Heights, which has many peaks and valleys, and our infrastructure has been overwhelmed over the past few decades. And we, unlike some of the other communities across the state, we have significantly less storm drainage as it was planned in our community in 1949 when it was incorporated. So we've made some strides, but we have a long way to go, and the effects that we see are wide-ranging. In our worst example, flooding has eroded land behind 7 homes in Forest Heights, creating a ravine that is more than 100 feet long and more than 24 feet deep. A comprehensive approach outlined in HB 449 to manage flood risks and mitigate their impacts is very welcome in our community, And I feel as the mayor, it's a necessity in our community. So we're very happy to support this bill, and we urge your support and favorable vote for House Bill 449, ensuring that Forsyths and other communities like us have the necessary support to safeguard our residents and infrastructure against the challenges of flooding. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mayor. First question is Delegate Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate, thanks for bringing this bill. I think it's very, very important. If you could just briefly though, elaborate on what we mean by overburdened and underserved communities, kind of explain how that's defined, in statute and for the purposes. of this
Sure,
bill.
it's an environmental justice term, which was recently put in statute. I'm sure that the chairman could point you to exactly which line and which number statute it is. But it's understanding that in recent years and what we've seen over the summer, our Supreme Court has begun striking down various types of laws that are specifically based on race or other categories like that. And so an underserved, overburdened community, unfortunately, will have a large number of minorities within it, a lot of individuals who are below the poverty line, so on and so forth. And so I'll get right back to you after this to send you the exact statute, but that's generally the direction we're going on. Thank you.
If you want a copy of it, I have it right here.
Right here.
Just so the overburdened community and underserved community were defined in law through the Climate Solutions Now Act. And it really was an intent to make sure that when we talk about environmental justice, a lack of definition, a lack of specificity was not an excuse for inaction. That Maryland's actually gone further than many other states in defining the terms overburdened and underserved to enhance the ability to provide resources to combat environmental injustice. And so it's overburdened community has a number of different indicators related to health outcomes and pollution burden, and underserved community. And so that really gets at, again, pollution load in a census tract or in a community, whereas underserved really gets at lack of access to resources and systemic barriers that have been in place for a long time for communities to access resources. And so the three specific metrics in underserved are at least 25% of the residents qualify as low income, 50% of the residents identify as non-white, or at least 15% of the residents have limited English proficiency. So that's why the two different terms, overburdened and underserved, and that's why you see them, put together in terms of pollution burden, health burden, and then also lack of access to resources. And so when you're allocating 40% of a fund to those communities, it's because it's a recognition that there's been systemic barriers in place for those same communities to access the resources available. And you're welcome to this printout if you'd like. Yeah.
Are there, yes, Delegate Guyton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for bringing this bill. And I know, I think you said we passed this last year, so I'm not gonna mess with it this year, but I do have two questions. One super easy and fast. I see the numbers in here for allocation. How much is in the budget this year?
It's $10 million this year.
It's 2 or 10?
10. It's
10. Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
more than we've had in the past,
It
right?
would
But not the
authorize
20 million
governor
that, yes.
To exceed the $10 million
Gotcha.
in funding.
Gotcha. That was number one. And then the other question though is we've heard from a lot of different areas here who would fall under the category of both overburdened, underserved, and coastal likely to flood. I'm curious as to, and I don't have flooding much in my district, knock on wood. So I'm curious as to where the 40% came from, because I wonder if it's not actually more than 40% of the coastline that would be considered. Where'd the number come from is the question.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. So the 40% is actually reflective of a federal, so the Biden-Harris administration issued an executive order a couple years ago, the Federal Justice 40 Initiative. And so you'll see in the Maryland, a lot of initiatives use 40%. We like to say at least 40%. So you'll see the number in there is actually at least 40%. So should MDE deem it necessary, they can allocate 100% of the funds to overburdened or underserved communities. It's just the number 40 reflects the Federal Justice 40 Initiative.
Okay, thank you for that. I didn't know if it was some sort of algorithm about the actual number of underserved communities along coastal areas, but it's not. It could be 60%, it could be 70%. Okay. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing
Thank
for
you.
HB 449. Thank you so much, Delegate Ivy.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mayor and Mayor. So at this point, we will have HB 170, Delegate Williams, State Finance for Prohibitions, Appropriations, maglev, Levitation, Transportation System. Do you have a panel, Madam?
Mr. Warmer and the mayor of Greenbelt was here. I saw him earlier today. I've got certain where he disappeared to.
That's no problem. If he comes in, we'll accept him.
Okay, thank you.
Begin whenever you're ready.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Boyce, and members of the wonderful House Environment and Transportation Committee. I am Delegate Nicole Williams, testifying in favor of House Bill 170, also known as the Prohibition on Appropriations for a Magnetic Levitation Transportation System. I have been before this committee previously on this bill, but for there's any new folks, just as a way of background, there is a proposed project that has been on and off on the books here in Maryland for a variety of years. It was on about 20 years ago, then came off, and now it's back again with regards to building what's known as a magnetic levitation train here in the state of Maryland, which can travel up to speeds of over 300 miles per hour, according to the company's written materials from Northeast Maglev, which is a subsidiary company that is actually owned by a Japanese company that has this technology there. They are in their materials, they are proposing to build the fastest train here in the United States that would take people from DC to New York in an hour, or so to speak. I'm not exactly certain of the time frame, but pretty quickly is what they are alleging. They are also stating that the construction of this train system would be purely through private enterprise, be solely paid for by their company and their parent company in Japan in order to construct this device. That's wonderful. And so therefore, since they have stated that they are able to do this without any state appropriation or any state funding, we have put forth this bill that you see in front of you just to ensure that Marylanders are not burdened with this project, which is still, I would say, in its infancy stages. Right now, the only permits that they have here are really to tentatively construct from DC to Baltimore, and that's it. They do not have authorizations from any of the other states up and down the I-95 corridor, such as Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, New York. And so I feel as though this project is a lofty idea. We obviously do want to try to figure out ways to reduce congestion up and down the I-95 corridor for a variety of different reasons. And so this project, though, since it is privately funded, we felt that it was appropriate to put forth this bill just to ensure that that continues while they are continuing to work extensively on getting all of the necessary approvals that they need to obtain in order to bring their dreams to fruition for high-speed rail from DC to New York. And so for those reasons, I am asking for a favorable vote for House Bill 170.
Good afternoon, all. I'm Daniel Lee Woomer, Maryland Coalition for Responsible Transit Board member and a member of the Citizens Against the SC Maglev, here in support of House Bill 170. Mr. Rogers has repeatedly stated that SC Maglev will not require taxpayer funds. House Bill 170 puts his position in law with the one caveat that funds can be used for administrative costs. Today, my testimony is going to be focused on two BWR claims, ridership and jobs. On ridership, BWR claims ridership will cover the operating costs. Where are the analyses to support this claim? Analyses by the Maryland Public Policy Institute, the Cato Institute, and by Dr. Owen Carey of George Washington University challenge the highly inflated ridership numbers. Ridership will likely be 1/10 of what BWR's projections, as will the revenue stream. An August 2023 Daily Record article reported Maryland was the 6th highest state in losing high-earning households, and went on to state that Washington, D.C. was losing high earners faster than any state. These are the people more likely to use the SC maglev. And add this to the continuing Baltimore City population decline and a huge rise in teleworking, SC maglev ridership projections are unbelievable. On jobs, you will again hear today that SC maglev will create lots of jobs. In 2017, the number was 75,000. By 2022, it was 200,000. Where and what are the economic assumptions, data sources, and analyses that support these job creation numbers? A $27.8 million federal grant was awarded in 2015 to study SC maglev feasibility. The ridership, revenue, and job projections were funded by tax dollars. We paid for these analyses. Why haven't we seen them? In summary, MCRT and others have assembled a long list of reasons why SC maglev should be stopped before any more tax dollars are wasted. MCRT submissions, position papers, and articles and presentations can be found on our website. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm using this opportunity now to call Mr. Timothy George, City of Greenbelt.
Oh, he's the city manager. I think it was supposed to be Mayor Emmett Jordan here on behalf of the city of Greenbelt.
Is he here?
But I saw him earlier. I'm not certain where he is. I just sent a text message to my office.
And I have him, Timothy George, and Emmett Jordan signed up. Neither one of them here. That's fine. We'll take questions at this time. Does anyone have any questions for Delegate Williams and her panel? Do you? Yes, please. Yeah.
You don't have to get up, sir. Thank you. The question I have, I kind of enjoy the maglev story. What kind of money does the state of Maryland going to get? Bottom line.
I don't think that the state of Maryland will receive any money if this train is constructed. As I stated, it's purely private enterprise. So I believe the funds will go to their shareholders. But I'm not aware of any money that the state would receive.
The major concern that we have is because of the ridership saying that the ridership would basically cover the costs to maintain and operate the system. And we're projecting numbers that are 1/10 their projections, and that Maryland will end up having to subsidize this thing, both in construction and very much in operation and maintenance. So it'll cost Maryland at the very time when we're $150 million question in transportation area for the state of Maryland. Why would we even think about building a competitive system when we're improving MARC, we're improving Amtrak. Amtrak right now has passed for their second generation, Extella, has passed FRA approval, and they're currently running tests on the Northeast corridor. That train is capable of 200-mile-per-hour runs. It won't do that on the existing system because we have to, like, for example, we have to replace the Baltimore-Washington tunnel, okay, which is a bottleneck.
So essentially, all they'll be using is the rails.
Well, they're not going to use the existing rail system. So what they're proposing is to construct a brand new rail system totally separate from our existing rail system that will go through a number of existing communities, neighborhoods. The Patuxent Wildlife Reserve will be impacted based on their proposed their proposal in terms of the 2 tracks that they have finalized as proposed locations for this brand new rail system that they wish to construct. They claim that the existing rail right-of-ways will not work for their system because it has too many curves and turns on it and would slow down the progress of these magnetic trains. And so therefore, they would be basically having to establish brand new right-of-ways in brand new areas in order to construct this project.
One of the things to try to be careful with is, though we use rail quite frequently, it is not a steel rail system. The magnetic levitation uses a guideway. There's no steel rails. There's no steel rails and steel wheels on rails. It actually starts off on rubber tires. It hits about 90 miles an hour. the magnetic system, levitation system kicks in, the propulsion system has kicked in, and it raises on a magnetic field. The tires retract and it goes down the guideway. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So the thing is the two technologies are totally different and they're not, you can't combine them. Okay.
Thank you so much. The gentleman, and can you, for the record? Can we
Oh,
just
sure.
state
For the
who you
record,
are?
my name is Emmett Jordan. I'm mayor of the city of Greenbelt, and I'm here to speak on behalf of my residents and city council, along with many other residents and elected officials across Prince George's County, Maryland. We're asking for your support of HB 107. This bill is specifically about state funding for maglev projects like the BWRR, and it's not focused on jobs, training, or minority contracting. Our precious state transportation fund should be focused on local transportation needs like expanding MARC train commuter service, finishing the Baltimore Red Line, or maybe building a light rail along Route 50 from New Carrollton to Annapolis. Our taxpayer funds are appropriate for these types of projects. Public funds shouldn't be used as a contingency backup for private projects. Large transportation infrastructure projects that span multiple states should be led by the federal government. This ensures proper oversight and keeps future rights of way accessible to the public. Maryland can't afford to allow control or ownership of projects like the maglev in the hands of private entities. Allowing private control over projects like the maglev could lead to issues that we see with MARC train access to CSX tracks or the sky-high tolls that we're seeing on toll roads in Northern Virginia. So the BWRR's project status, current status, includes, the final environmental impact statement is missing and the water quality permit was denied, and shows some of the risks that are actually reflective of what might happen when Maryland tax dollars go towards private P3 projects without thorough vetting. So we believe that the Maryland taxpayers should not be on the hook, should not be funding, shouldn't be going to this kind of a project. So we ask you for your support of HB 107.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, sorry, I was a little bit late. I was tied
No,
up.
it's quite all right. We do have a question from an Appropriation Committee member, Malcolm Ruff.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And I apologize because I am not intimately familiar with the bill file. So I just have a question about the opposition and in this panel's opinion, because I see some of the opposition that I was able to just see kind of looks like it's kind of copied and pasted and repeating itself. So what is the real merit to the opposition if the maglev, organization is saying they don't need any state funds?
I'm not really certain the reasoning behind the opposition. I mean, and I just want to be clear. I mean, I know like the building trades are in supportive of this, which I completely understand, supportive of the construction of the maglev, which I completely understand because it means jobs for their members. And in no way am I attempting to preclude jobs for their members with this bill. Again, they have stated that the construction of this could take place without any state funding. So therefore, those construction jobs would still very much still be in place with their private funds in order to construct this project, as well as after the project is completed, jobs for their operational endeavors could still take place because again, that would be paid for by their company. And so I'm not certain why there's this opposition that if this bill passes, it would prevent jobs from existing, because in theory, those jobs should continue to exist, whether this bill passes or not.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, and if I could I add just, public funds shouldn't be used as a contingency backup for private projects, and this kind of pertains to P3s a little bit. I mean, if the private funds are there, the project, is viable, but as far as, contingency funds, after the fact, the federal government, these large infrastructure projects somehow, if they're not managed by the public sector, the unintended outcomes, and I'll reference those sky-high tolls over in Northern Virginia, we can't really control that. So That's my point of view.
Yeah, and then I think just also piggyback on what Mayor Jordan stated, I know California is currently in the process of trying to construct a fast rail project that was subsidized by the state of California. This is slightly different in the sense of it wasn't seeking private funding, but they've had enormous cost overruns with that project. The state of California has in the construction of that project. And so, that's just also something just to, as a point of reference.
Thank you so much. We'll have Delegate Guyton, please.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing the bill and for trying to educate us on all this. I'm new to this committee, so I'm trying to wrap my head around this whole concept. I have, I guess, two really quick questions for you. The first refers to 7-240, which is which says we're not just talking about appropriations to build it then, which is what I've heard from you, but also neither the state nor any unit or instrumentality of the state may use any appropriation for, mag lab located or to be located in the state. Does that refer to things like if this were built without any public funds, right? Assuming, best case scenario from your point of view, does that also, would it include firefighting in those areas, police forces, anything like that? What specifically does that particular part refer to?
Yeah, so what that particular part refers to, so they had received, the state had, they had received a federal grant that was passed along to the state for assistance from MDOT with regards to design supports for the initial environmental impact study that was submitted to the federal government. And so what that would also include would just be utilizing, again, state employees and state resources to further assist with that by using state funds. Now, again, they can certainly apply probably for more money from the federal government, for additional grant money, for additional support from our state agencies, but that money would not come from the state.
Yeah, I thank you for that, because without some of this background, some of this is hard to understand, like why it's in there. So that explains that piece a little bit more. But so they brought in a grant themselves.
Yes.
But we don't want.
And that money has run out. So we're no longer providing that support.
Okay. But we did when they had the grant.
Correct.
But under this bill, we wouldn't be able to.
The state would not be footing the bill.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm still trying to, and then my other question was, we've heard a lot from you all about how you're certain that the state would end up subsidizing this project.
If this bill does not pass, that is a possibility.
Why do we think that? I know you talked about California, but that sounds like a California funded project. So
it was a California funded project. And I say that to say that they have projected what their costs are going to be to construct this project. I don't know if there are cost overruns, if they would have the additional resources to continue the construction of that project. And if that were to occur, would they come to the state to help them subsidize those cost overruns? Additionally, for the operation of the project, as Mr. Warmer stated, that their projections on ridership, and I think those projections were done pre-COVID, and so their projections on ridership are not realistic in today's environment. We have seen decreases in ridership. I mean, we were just talking about WMATA earlier this morning on the House floor. And so we know ridership patterns have definitely severely modified since the pandemic. And so we don't believe that those ridership projections are currently accurate. And therefore, if they don't have those ridership projected revenue coming in, then would they come to the state to help subsidize their operations, because of that?
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And thank you, Delegate, for bringing this bill. I agree with a lot. I have a lot of trepidation about maglev myself. I don't live in the corridor, but I am concerned, and I totally agree with some of the comments made about private-public partnerships. I don't think they've served us that well here in this state. But anyway, having said that, the mayor, I think, said that we could get federal money for this project, but I think federal money probably would require some state matching money, at least under the infrastructure law. So I don't know if that's possible. I mean, under this bill, that would be precluded. But my question is this, on the issue that that was already raised about the opposition from labor, from the building trades, a delegate that you raised. Do you know if it's totally private funds, whether or not prevailing wage laws, for example, and would be able to be applied to the project, or does it have to be public funds? Because I'm not sure that if a private company constructs it, that prevailing wage laws would apply in that case.
I'm not certain. I mean, obviously, we definitely try to require prevailing wage laws with public projects all the time. But with a private entity, I don't know if that would apply.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for this panel? I'm seeing none. We will go to our virtual witnesses. It is a Susan McCutcheon, Ray Jeffries, and Rhonda Krantz.
Hi, Susan McCutcheon. Am I ready? Okay.
Go for
it. Good afternoon, the members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. My name is Susan McCutcheon. I'm a member of the Maryland Coalition for Responsible Transit and the Prince George's County NAACP, both opposed to the SC Maglev project. I support high-speed steel rail, but not the SC Maglev. We understand that BWRR is actively seeking additional funding to continue to tap into federal taxpayer funds. A private company, they have repeatedly stated in their arguments in opposition to this bill that while they do not need state funds, they want them to be available just in case financial support is needed later in the project's implementation. My concern is that now is there later because their federal funds have been fully expended, as Delegate Williams indicated. Furthermore, they proffer the hackneyed argument that such legislation would send the wrong message to developers of innovative forms of transportation and discourage them from doing business with Maryland. The reality is that this bill would address only one specific overblown proposed project that has proven unable to support broad and questionable promises of, as mentioned previously, an influx of good-paying jobs, advanced technology education programs, and the uplifting of environmental justice communities to bring them and the state untold prosperity. There are a lot of major overblown claims out there. It is happening now. It occurred to me as listening to the previous testimony that even with the highly touted Brightline project, which is a high-speed steel rail, there are already coverage of stories about their projected costs increasing exponentially. It happens with all of these. So thank you so much, and please support this bill.
Thank you so much, Ms. McCutcheon. Ms. Krantz.
There we go. Yes, thank you for the opportunity to submit oral testimony in support of House Bill 170. My name is Rhonda Krantz. I live in Montgomery County, and I've been following the evolution of the proposed SC Maglev for several years. And I'll just mention one issue. Maglev trains, as noted, are not compatible with the state's existing transportations. They require their own operating systems and take massive amounts of land to build and operate. The permanent footprint of physical infrastructure of the proposed maglev would be approximately 1,400 acres. Over 30% of that would be in laydown, areas where construction waste is hauled and tools and other materials are stored. These areas would be situated close and far up and down the entire structure. And for perspective, the laydown area is equivalent to about 3 Disneylands. And any future maglev transportation system would need a comparable amount of land to build and maintain. A laydown at Powder Mill would incorporate 45 trucks and 90 workers arriving daily. The traffic input at the BW Parkway and Maryland 197 worksite would be 51 trucks per day and 190 vehicles arriving and leaving, And this had major impact on transportation in the areas and the communities. These numbers are for physical infrastructure only and not include the impact beyond. It doesn't include direct impacts on communities and environmentally sensitive areas, or the distances pollutants are carried downstream to the Chesapeake Bay. So Maryland shouldn't have to bear the costs, suffer further damage to our already used precious and limited natural resources, or impair our most vulnerable communities with this technology, either now or in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Such a sufficient timing. Jay Jeffries, is Jay Jeffries? No Jay Jeffries. Are any questions for this virtual panel? Seeing none, we will move to the next panel on favorable testimonies from Mike Sakata, MTBA, Thurman Jones, Patriots Technology Training Center, Victoria Leonard, Baltimore DC Building Trades, and Bill Scott, Baltimore Washington Rapid Rail.
Go to the line, Bill. Want me to start first? Thank you, Vice Chairman. I am Bill Scott. I am the president of Northeast Maglev and Baltimore Washington Rapid Rail and Chief Operating Officer. I appear today to convey my strong opposition to HB 170. I've submitted my written summary, but I'll give you a quick summary today of my written testimony. BWR is a franchise railroad by the Maryland Public Service Commission to operate a 311 superconducting maglev train between DC and Baltimore. Once constructed, the train will bring passengers between DC and Baltimore with a stop at BWI Airport in 15 minutes. As deemed by the Public Service Commission, the project results in substantial economic and social benefits to Baltimore and the state of Maryland. And is most notable, in over 13 years, Baltimore Washington Rapid Rail has not and will not ask for state appropriations. The main argument behind this bill has been that Maryland taxpayers and state funds are better suited elsewhere to improve and upgrade the existing rail. We agree that the state should focus on improving the state-run transportation projects, which is why we have never asked the state legislature for financial support. And we know this is especially important now with the challenges that the state and MDOT are grappling with budget deficits. The draft EIS, which was published by the Federal Railroad Administration, which is covering the study on this process, which is over 4,000 pages long, has said that to the degree that the trains on the corridor are expected to be at capacity between 2030 and 2045, these diversions, being the SC Maglev, will free up capacity for additional travelers without making public investment to add capacity. In other words, by alleviating stress on MARC and highways, taxpayers will see savings of added transit capacity and reduced traffic without state appropriations. While SC Maglev is not requesting state funding, nor has it, passing a bill that prevents and discourages Marylanders from resolving issues that plague its citizens is simply an effort we cannot support. For this reason, we ask that you strongly oppose HB 170 and submit an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Vice Chair Boyce, for the opportunity to testify in opposition to HB 170. I'm Victoria Leonard, and I'm here on behalf of the Baltimore DC Building Trades. We represent 28 construction trade unions across Maryland, Northern Virginia, and the District of Columbia. Combined, our trade unions represent more than 30,000 skilled craft professionals in the construction industry. And I guess the best thing that I can add to the discussion is that to me, this bill is a solution in search of a problem. And my colleague here just explained that there's no state financing involved and the project doesn't need it. So why is it necessary to put something like this in the code? To me, it just clogs up the code of Maryland and it isn't necessary. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Thurman Jones. I'm with the Patriots Technology Training Center, and our organization is opposition on HB HBO 170. And the reason being, for the last 29 years, I've been working with students to build a roadmap for them to have a STEM career. And a lot of these students, when they go to college, after college, or before college, they need jobs. And we see an opportunity for our students to have jobs right in the state of Maryland, work for MagLab or whoever, or have their own business. And I think that MagLab is an opportunity to see our future jobs for our future engineers. So I'm hoping that I'm not favorable of the HBO 170 bill, because our students need those jobs. They need mentors. They need to work with the trade unions and those type of things. So we really hope that you show unfavorable for the HBO 170 bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Environment Transportation Committee. My name is Michael Sakata, President and CEO of Maryland Transportation Builders and Materials Association, at the helm championing over 30,000 workers who are the backbone of our state's transportation infrastructure. I'm here to talk about HB 170, the anti-progress bill. MTMA has been an active and continues to be an active supporter of SC Maglev, because this is a type of transportation project that will make a huge impact on Maryland and its residents. It will create well-paying careers for our workers, both during the multi-year construction phase and also on a permanent basis, bringing the estimated 120,000 construction-related jobs to the region. Second are the environmental benefits, significantly reducing the greenhouse gas emissions by removing those millions of car trips off our roadways, thereby improving our air quality. Lastly, it will create that, the transformational projects, the mobility opportunities for millions who along the Northeast corridor. Adding SC Maglev train will be equivalent of adding an 8-lane highway in Maryland. It's about opportunities, about choices, right? We make a choice to come to work every day, by car, by bike, by ped, by, bus 11, as my mom would say, all those things, right? This is, another option, right? A reliable option. This is an attempt to block not only the potential source of thousands of transportation construction jobs, but a potential source of opportunity and a public good for so many. It sends a message to the federal government, Japanese government, and all other interested parties that Maryland is not supportive of this train and does not want it in Maryland. As a commissioner in the governor's Transportation Revenue and Infrastructure Needs Commission, with the task asked to find a solution to Maryland's staggering $3.1 billion shortfall in our transportation budget, it's imperative that we embrace both innovative and dependable solutions to bridge this gap. The SC Maglev project is a beacon of progress, and this cutting edge technology is just what we need to move forward. So I strongly ask everybody to oppose HB 170.
Thank you so much, Delegate Love.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are you, to anybody on the panel, are you asking for state funds?
I will take this. No, we're not, nor have we.
Okay, then I'm really
13 years.
confused. So why are you opposed to a bill that says you can't have state funds if you're not asking for state funds?
We're opposed to the conditions it set. It sets a tone that Maryland is not interested in providing this technology. It sends a tone, as Mike just mentioned, to both the federal government and the Japanese government that Maryland does not want innovative, safe, and basically the biggest EV you could have in the state be brought to us. So it sets a precedent of trying to put legislation in place that isn't called for. If we ever came for appropriations, the committees and everybody else would have their chance at that point to strike it down and put this legislation. It's uncalled for at this point.
I'd like to add to that if you will. Also sends a message to our engineers that they no longer can engineer those transformative projects. I mean, I think we heard earlier that this magnetic levitation is different than the rails. It requires folks to think outside the box. And that's kind of the thinking that we need to look for alternative and transformative solutions. So that, to me, to echo, it just says, hey, we don't want this, and I think that's a bad message to send to, the US and everybody else who looking to do work in Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Problem. Thank you, Delegate Davis.
Madam Chair, there is still one question still on the floor, and now that there are two union persons on the panel, I want to ask the question about, first, two-part question. You will still get jobs when the rail gets built, right? You will still have jobs when the maglev gets built.
Yeah, there's two parts to that, right? There's the construction component, and then there's operations and maintenance project. And I think what we also look at is the O&M part. That's that long-term it's a different type of construction project, but yes, absolutely, that 123 is inclusive of that.
And to answer Delegate Foley's question to the previous panel, the maglev will be built with a project labor agreement. So it's going to create a lot of quality union jobs for a lot of residents in the Baltimore, Washington area.
Thank you.
We hope a voluntary project labor agreement, yes.
Voluntary.
Did you say we hope?
No, it was signed over 5 years, and I believe in 2018, a PLA was signed.
So you have them,
Yes.
PLA. Thank you.
Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here. So are you aware that we have a $3 billion deficit in the Transportation Trust Fund right now?
Yes, we are.
So if you're not asking for state money and we have very limited transportation money available, in fact, we have a deficit and projects were cut, how does it send a message that we don't want the maglev when all we're saying is we have state projects that need funding and we don't have enough funding for that? And so we just don't want to make sure that this funding doesn't go to a private project. So can you explain how that sends that message that you say it sends?
Well, I believe it sends the message that we're putting in restrictions that have never been asked for, right? The funds that's in the transportation fund can be used however the state wants to do it at this point. We are not asking for any money, nor have we. We've put in over $150 million to date, never asking the state for a dollar. So why would you put that restriction in? We have never done it, and it sends a bad message to both the Japanese who've offered financial funding for this, over $8 billion to get this done. And to correct one thing earlier that was said is BWRR and Northeast MAGA are not a subsidiary of any Japanese company, right? And I think that's important because we are a veteran-owned Maryland-based company wholly, right? And we're not asking for that, but we have secured funding from overseas and through the Federal Railroad Administration. And one of the questions I believe Delegate Foley brought up earlier is for federal funds, there is a state match requirement. Every state match requirement has been met by Baltimore, Washington, and Rapid Rail for both the grant that has been exhausted and has been committed to for the 3 grants that are outstanding and have been awarded to the state of Maryland at this point. All that money has been committed to by Baltimore, Washington, Rapid Rail.
All right, thank you. So in your response to the chair of the Transportation Subcommittee just a few minutes ago, you said you wanted to retain the ability to go to the Appropriations Committee and the Appropriations Committee could decide at that time. And yet you're saying you're not seeking state money and you will never seek state money. So this bill is unnecessary. Why would you even raise the issue of going to the Appropriations Committee?
We don't plan on ever going to, but all I said was that if it ever went to it, then they can address it then. But we have no intent of asking for state funds, nor have we. So why are we passing a rule or a law for something that's never been brought up before?
Do you understand how that seems to be a conflict between what you're saying?
I understand. I don't understand why we'd say something for something that's never been asked for before.
It seems to be a solution in search of a problem. I mean, there isn't a problem that needs to be solved.
Well, thank you.
I'm going to try to clear up what I think Delegate Ruth is trying to say is what you're saying is that given that the state has already provided what you're saying is a matching fund to money that you've used thus far, what you're saying is while you may not ask for money, is that the administration may ask for money. Is that what I hear you're saying when you say that you're not going to ask, but maybe the administration would ask, given the fact that you've had matching grants before?
So the matching grants before have never been paid out of state funds, just for clarity, right? There's been no state money used on any of the grants or any of the money for this project to date. Nor do we plan on coming to the state for funds. What we're concerned about is the message it sends to both the Federal Railroad Administration, to our overseas people who are providing the technology and helping us bring this to the US so that we have the safest and fastest transportation system and basically the biggest EV on the Northeast corridor.
Understood. Delegate Stewart.
Thank you all for coming. Quick question, because we've been talking a lot about this project that's been planned, but the bill is not about a project, right? It prohibits state funding for a technology called magnetic levitation. And so isn't it true that if, for example, in 2040, Maryland decided to build a new MARC line as a state-run project and use magnetic levitation as the technology to build the MARC line, this bill would prohibit the construction of said line.
Yes, theoretically, yes.
Thanks.
There any other questions? Oh, Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My position on maglev is not a secret. Dating back to my time on the county council, I have not been supportive. And one of the many reasons is knowing with virtual certainty that at some point you will be asking for state subsidies. But my question is about that $27.8 million grant that was mentioned on the previous panel, and whether in fact that ever produced any kind of study. What was the study about? And if you published something, where did that go? Where can we find the results of that study?
Sure, it's a great question. So the 27.8 million was used to do the NEPA study. The DEIS was published in January of 2021. It is public record. It is available. We can send you the link to it. It's about 4,000 pages long. It has all the environmental, all the ridership, all the details that were done as part of the study. Now, this NEPA study is done independently of Baltimore Washington Rapid Rail. It was done by MTA. And that's how it was done, to make sure that it followed all the rules and guidelines for a NEPA study, and it was through the DEIS and went through public comment in 2021.
Okay,
And it's
so
available online now.
So the MTA did the study?
MTA was designated to do the study, and they hired a consultant, AECom, to actually do the work. But it was behind basically what you call Chinese wall, where it was done as part of the NEPA work, of which we were only the technical consultant for the technology. But they did all the environmental impact.
Okay, so that's interesting. I did not realize that. I'm a little bit confused though. Who received the $27.8 million grant?
So the $27.8 million grant was awarded from the Federal Railroad Administration to MDOT. MDOT then did the environmental impact study. It assigned it to MTA, and MTA subcontracted it out to AECom.
Okay, so BWRR never touched that money. It didn't go through your organization?
No, it was coordinated through MDOT, and then any state matching funds that were acquired as part of that, BWR paid that 20% match to the Federal Railroad Administration.
Okay, so what did it cost BWRR then?
Roughly $7 million. So the
Okay.
20% match on the.
Okay, if you could forward that link to the study to the committee, I'd appreciate it.
No problem. We can do that right afterwards.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Delegate Lehman. Are there any other questions for this panel? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing for HB 170. Thank you so much for a great conversation. Next, we have HB 228, Natural Resources, Maryland State Park Funds and Plan Alterations.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Joint Committee. For the record, Paul Pedito, I'm the Assistant Secretary for Land Resources at DNR. You have our written testimony. This is a departmental bill. It makes some minor technical and other alterations to last year's incredible piece of legislation, the Great Maryland Outdoors Act. And thank you to all of you who moved that bill last year and played a role in getting us here today. I said yesterday in one of my testimonies, I want to explain what a bill does not do. I want to make it clear what this bill does not do. It does not alter the funding, so there's no fiscal impact, and it does not derail our absolute motivation to make the Maryland State Park system a world-class system to be admired across the country and the world. What it does is just gives us flexibility in three specific ways. It expands our timeline to complete a comprehensive strategic plan tied to long-term, the LPPRP, so a larger plan that we're required to do every 5 years. We will build those two together. It gives us some flexibility in the allocation of the funding. It doesn't move the amounts, it doesn't change the amounts, but it changes words like up to and at least, so that if we get into a situation with contracts and contractors where we have overruns or in fact situations where we're spending less money, we won't trip those codified triggers in there. And then finally, and this is an issue that we know there's some concerns about. Some opponents out there have
concerns about this. I can assure you, this is a technical amendment. What this does is it makes certain that the language in the bill as it exists today that refers just to state parks allows us to use the capital funds for other lands that are in the state park system that are not called state parks. And those are specifically natural resource management areas, natural environmental areas. There's even a state forest that is run by state parks. And most importantly, it is those lands that are settled in fee, but have not yet been codified in COMAR as state parks. There is a gap in time between when we go to settlement and when we get these things listed in COMAR. We work on those lands in that interim. We can't do that. And I worked with committee council a number of years ago in making sure the bill we talked about yesterday on Sunday hunting, we made sure that that bill says the department may not authorize hunting on Sundays in lands in the state park system. The GMOA needs that technical amendment in order to make sure that we can include all those lands. The other thing that it does give us the ability to do is it gives us the ability to allow for in those places where we have capacity issues. We had 140 some closures in our state parks last year. If a park is reaching capacity on a regular basis, we could use this money to stand up infrastructure. Think literal like temporary bathrooms, parking lot improvements, minor trail tweaks, so that we can route those people from a Patapsco State Park to a nearby wildlife management area or a state forest to do the activity they were going to do in the state park that doesn't require the infrastructure that that park did. So we're talking very rare and unique circumstances. We've got some amendments that we've been working on that will make that crystal clear. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I do not see any, so thank you.
Very good, thank you.
We do have a favorable with amendment oral testimony from Bruce Bariano representing the Maryland Park Rangers Association.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Bruce Bariano, I'm here on the Maryland Park Rangers. Over in the Senate, I testified against this bill. And here I'm favorable with amendments because we are trying to work out amendments. I will say that for those of you respectfully that were here a couple of years ago when this was done, it was a landmark. It was unheard of. Never in the 52 years I've been before this legislature have the parks as a entity in Maryland and the Rangers been given such attention. This was an incredible piece of legislation. Everyone deserved applaud and recognition and credit for it. The beauty is that it took an amount of money, which was not the full amount needed, but a very large amount of money, and it locked it down to only be used to make repairs desperately needed and increase personnel desperately needed in the current parks. And this bill has come in. We learned about the bill when it was introduced. And that lockbox is now being suggested to be opened by this legislation. And in the remaining few seconds I have, we're working on amendments sincerely and legitimately, but we've not seen any amendments that make sure that when the box is open, if this bill passes, that money will be expended, not for future things, but let's take care of what's being done now. And if any monies are taken out of that amount that was put aside 2 years ago, people know about it. There's some accountability. There's some discussion before it's done, so that needs that are necessary today, when this bill was passed, are taken care of first. The testimony you heard, which I respect, talks about the future and expanding, which is wonderful, but the needs of the past and the present need to be taken care of first. So we will work with the department and hopefully be in a good place. Thank you very much. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I do not see any.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Good afternoon. That concludes the bill hearing on HB 228. We'll now turn to HB 135. I believe we have a representative from Delegate Charkoudian's office, Maryland Transportation Authority, Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety and Accessibility.
Afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce. My name is Rose Stutz, Delegate Charcudian's Chief of Staff, here on her behalf to request a favorable report on HB 135. She regrets not being here herself. She's currently testifying in economic matters. Maryland's Complete Streets policy was implemented in 2012 and captures a quote philosophy of developing context-sensitive solutions that support pedestrian, bicycle, ADA, and transit accessibility, end quote. The Maryland Transportation Authority is responsible for our state's toll facilities, including 2 turnpikes, 2 tunnels, and 4 bridges. Unlike all the other MDOT modal agencies, including the State Highway Administration, the MDTA is currently not required to create plans that follow the state's Complete Streets legislative directive. This has led to lost opportunities to boost safety by creating multimodal options as part of key MDTA projects, notably the Harry W. Nice Memorial Bridge and Intercounty Connector. Maryland has significant gaps in these local and national networks, sometimes due to water crossings and also due to interstate highways that lack safe, grade-separated walk/bike crossings. Plans that incorporate complete streets principles are safer, better for our economy, more accessible for all Marylanders, and more environmentally sustainable than motor vehicle-focused transportation planning. This bill closes gaps in our statewide plans for pedestrian and cyclist safety by aligning Maryland Transportation Authority safety requirements with the State Highway Administrations and other Maryland multimodal transportation administrations. This bill implements the following changes to the transportation article. It removes the section preventing pedestrians and cyclists from using MDTA highways with the stipulation that cyclists can only use the shoulder if it's wide enough and there's not already a separated path. It requires MDTA to construct protected pathways on new and existing bridges if they will be doing major renovations. This has been done on recent bridges of varying length around the US, including the replacement Tappan Zee and Pensacola Bay bridges. Locally, the Woodrow Wilson and Frederick Douglass bridges have such facilities, which are quite popular. It also requires MDTA in collaboration with others to identify locations for and plan to construct protected pathways that cross or run parallel to MDTA highways. When identifying those locations, MDTA will prioritize connecting to transit stations, critical needs locations, neighborhoods separated by MDTA highways, and traversing natural barriers. If MDTA believes construction to not be feasible, it may request a waiver that will go to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee and need approval from the Secretary of Transportation. The delegate also wanted me to mention that she knows that there is a high price associated with this legislation, and she's open to significant amendments to address that.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is John Corrin, Bicycle Advocates for Annapolis and Anne Arundel County. But today, on behalf of a coalition of advocates at the local, state, and national level. What's behind this is we've had failed promises from MDTA in the past. The Complete Streets bill that Rose mentioned, 2018, every modal agency of MDOT is in that bill. MDTA got themselves crossed off of that bill. The ICC was promised to have a parallel shared use path. It was taken away at the time of construction. And then we had similar with the Nice Bridge, announced by the governor to include a separated bike ped facility. And when contract awarded, it was taken away. So we would like to have in statute a policy that gets MDTA in the boat, if you will, with all of the modal agencies to fully embrace the strategy that Maryland already has adopted to try to address traffic congestion, greenhouse gas emission, public health, affordable and equitable transportation by making safe alternative modes available. And oftentimes, an interstate highway is a barrier, is a wall to people trying to travel on foot or on bike, and waterways are similarly a barrier. So let's get a policy in place so that MDTA by default includes these types of things where it makes sense. There's a lot of places where it's not going to make sense. We're not looking for bike lanes on I-95. I will say that the new director of MDTA has reached out to us in a spirit of collaboration. We look forward to working with him and with the agency to address some of the fiscal concerns in this bill and have MDTA embrace active transportation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, Madam Chair, committee members.
I'm Larry Zarzecki. I'm a resident of Queen Anne's County, and I'm a volunteer for AARP. AARP is the largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization statewide. We have approximately 850,000 members. I believe key priorities of the organization include creating livable and sustainable communities and individuals. You have to pardon me. It's getting to be an off time for me. Key priorities of our organization include creating livable and sustainable communities, which is keeping people in their houses and aging in place as long as possible. I've seen this work. I see it every day living on the shore. We have the Kent Narrows Bridge, which shares US Route 50. And with the barriers that are in place, people commute every day from Graysonville over to the island to go to the doctors, to go grocery shopping, to see relatives, places of worship. And it's shared. It's very unique. And it's also a beautiful setting through the marshlands and the wetlands that cross the river. If any member would like, I would invite everyone over, supply you a bicycle, and we'll take a ride down the cross country trail or South County Trail, and you will see how people riding bicycles, electric bicycles, can commute peacefully and respectively together. Thank you so much for your consideration, and we request a favorable decision.
Thank you all. Are there any questions for Delegate Charkoudian's representative, Delegate Naraki?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It could really be to anyone on the panel. So I have it's not an MDTA road, but it's a SHA road that kind of fits the pattern here. It's Route 40 in my district. Speed limit's 50 miles per hour on the road. We've recently put bike lanes on the road and other pedestrian infrastructure there. It's now the deadliest stretch of road in Baltimore County for bikes and pedestrians because of the speed of that road. So I just want to understand what you think would be where would this be appropriate? Because to me, a 50 mile per hour highway is not an appropriate place to put these kinds of things. So what would be an appropriate kind of road?
Yeah, what's most important to us is a fully separated lane on a bridge, like we have on the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, like was mentioned on the old Kent Narrows Bridge, a fully separated so that there's a physical vertical barrier between people on foot and bike and the vehicles, not just a stripe of paint. The next most important thing would be crossings, overhead crossings. So while there's a big highway project underway, include an overhead crossing so that people on foot and bike can get from one side to the other. Federal government has a Reconnecting Communities project grant program specifically to address places where communities have been divided by a highway, cutting right through and separating two sides. So we always prefer fully separated infrastructure so that they're not right next to the cars. But in a lot of places in Maryland, there is no option but to utilize a road or utilize a shoulder on a high-speed road. It's never our preference. But in Maryland, current statute is if the speed limit is 50 or less, bicycles are permitted. And it's because in many cases, there's no alternative. And for people who rely on bicycles to get from A to B that don't have cars or can't drive, there's just no other option for them.
Sure. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay, we do have one other favorable signed up, David Arndt. Is he here? Okay, then that concludes the bill hearing on HB 135. We'll stick with Rose from Delegate Charkoudian's office, talk about HB 413, Montgomery County Speed Monitoring Systems, publication of notice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also, I beg your forgiveness on my voice. I have a cold and it's chosen this optimal moment to fail me. Rose Stutz, Chief of Staff to Delegate Charkoudian, here again requesting a favorable report on HB 413. Montgomery County is one of the first county governments in the country to initiate a Vision Zero plan. We're making strides to reach our goal of zero vehicle-related deaths by 2030, but consistently we run into barriers preventing progress. One barrier is the current process for adding speed camera monitoring systems in our communities. Current statute reads as follows. Before activating a speed monitoring system, the local jurisdiction shall publish notice of the location of the speed monitoring system on its website and in a newspaper of general circulation in the jurisdiction. This section of statute was established in 2009 when there were more newspapers in general circulation, and it was considered the best way to ensure public awareness of a change to the neighborhood. Given the limited number of publications that currently meet this requirement in Montgomery County in 2024, this largely means publishing in the Washington Post. Costs for these types of ads in the Washington Post can be thousands of dollars for each posting, an unnecessarily large expense. With today's online presence, posting on a website can reach a large audience and promote community awareness of a speed camera installation, similar to the role newspapers once held. This bill will remove the requirement for publishing notice in a newspaper during the process of adding new speed monitoring systems in Montgomery County. There will still be requirements for public notification through a website. Also, please note in your bill file the Montgomery County delegation letter of support. I respectfully request a favorable report on HB 413.
Thank you. Are there any questions about this local bill? Okay, great job, Rose. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes the bill hearing on HB 413. We'll turn to Delegate Schmidt, HB 770, operating, or I'll just call it Nick's Law. If you have a panel or anything, feel free to bring them up. Do you want to have the panel come up?
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, esteemed members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. For the record, not Delegate Stewart, who is much more handsome. This is Delegate Stuart Schmidt, District 33B. Move favorable. And more importantly, the neighbor of Marie and Ed Barton, the parents of Nick Barton. I'm here to present House Bill 770, Nick's Law. Last year, this body passed House Bill 483, Senate Bill 74, grossly negligent or drunk or drugged operation of a vehicle or vessel, which is now law. This year's House Bill 770 simply ties a loophole. Existing law, it is illegal in the state of Maryland to operate a vessel while under the influence of drugs or alcohol, just as it is for a vehicle. And while the limits and penalties are technically the same, the administrative process is vastly different. First, the state of Maryland issues driver's licenses that can be suspended or revoked in an administrative process that operates separate than in parallel with a criminal procedure for conviction of drugged under the influence. While Maryland does require boaters born on or after July 1st of 1972 to obtain and carry a Maryland safe boating certificate, which can be obtained online, it does not issue boating licenses. The Maryland Safe Boating Certificate that boaters are required to carry when operating a vessel is not registered with the state. In other words, the state does not have a list of certified certificate holders. Therefore, it cannot be suspended or revoked. When a boater is barred from operating a vessel during a given time, the judiciary keeps record of this order. It does not communicate that to Natural Resource Police or within the Department of Natural Resources, nor do they have a process in place to store this information. The solution is simple. Require DNR to create and maintain a database for BART operators and require the judiciary to send names of BART operators to DNR. The database should be operational no later than October 1st of 2025. Page 3 outlines in the bill some of the penalties, and page 4 outlines the testing and keeping of this database. I too, like the Barton family, lost a loved one in a boating accident in 2009, which allegedly involved alcohol. Let's all work together to tie this loophole and pass this bill. I ask this committee for a favorable report.
Good afternoon, committee. I am Marie Barton. I am Nicholas Barton's mom. But this bill is named after Nick's Law. This is Nick. This is what this bill is named after. He was killed while on a boat. The driver of the boat was convicted of driving while intoxicated the boat. He's currently only serving 18 months for taking my son's life. And finding all of this out and the laws of boating, it is unbelievable in a state of Maryland, which is a boating state, the laws for BUI are completely different from DUI. There is no database, as he's saying, there is no way for DNR, when you're barred from boating, to go out and say, hey, you're not supposed to be boating. They can get on the boat and just drive away. There is nothing for DNR to be able to look up. Also, as far as penalty goes, that in this bill, it has where the judge, if you're not, nobody was injured or should I say killed, you get 2 years maximum of being barred, 5 years if results in a death. I ask in favor of let's work together so no other family has to go through what our family has gone through. Let's keep these waterways safe for boaters to enjoy the waters, not to be a big drunk fest, and be able to have DNR, the capabilities to be able to pull these boaters over and get them off the waters, to keep the waterways safe. In Nick's memory, and in everybody's out there that has lost a loved one's memory, something needs to be done with stricter boating laws in the state of Maryland. Thank you.
How you doing? I'm Ed Barton. I'm Nick's father. As Nick's father, I'm advocating for this bill, HB 740. It's known as Nick's Law. It's a step towards ensuring the justice and accountability for this tragic loss of Nick. Nick's ultimately passing as a passenger on a boat operated by an individual under the influence of drugs and alcohol highlights the urgent need for stricter penalties and enforcement of boating laws. Nick's Law represents the opportunity to strengthen boating regulations and impose stiffer penalties for those who endanger the lives of others through their reckless behavior on the water. By advocating for this bill, we are not only seeking justice for Nick, but also working towards preventing similar tragedies from occurring in the future. Through sharing Nick's story and advocating for the passage of Nick's Law, we can rise in awareness and the dangers about boating under the influence and the importance of upholding safety measures on the water. Please support this bill and advocate for the implementation of stricter penalties to deter the irresponsible and dangerous behavior while boating. Together, we can honor Nick's memory and promoting a safer and more responsible boating environment for all. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. For the record, Dylan Baylor, Legislative Director at the Department of Natural Resources, here testifying in support of House Bill 770. Firstly, I'd like to appreciate the sponsor for working with us over the interim to develop this legislation, along with the family of Nick for being here today and continuing to push the needle forward on this important issue. As you heard from the sponsor and the family, right now, the department does not have the said system in place to have an easily accessible platform in which our officers, when they're on the water, can check to see if somebody who has already been convicted of a BUI and had their privilege of boating revoked, to see if to have readily available access to that information on the waterways. So what this bill will do is it will require, one, the judiciary to transfer those convictions and those penalties to the department, and two, require the department to create said system so that way our officers, when they're on the water, can easily access that information to make that determination of if somebody should and is allowed to be on the water at that time. this is a top priority for the department to ensure that our waterways continue to be safe, and those that should not be boating and already had that privilege revoked are not doing so. And lastly, I did just want to say that we are working with both the House and the Senate sponsor on amendments to clarify that there are indeed penalties if the Natural Resource Police does find you in violation of boating while you have had that privilege revoked. So in current law, there are not penalties for violating that provision. So we're working with the sponsors to address that, to put additional teeth on it. So with that, we would respectfully request a favorable report with amendment, and I'm happy to take any questions.
My name is Carolyn Gramis. I'm an assistant state's attorney here in Anne Arundel County. I was actually the prosecutor on the Barton matter. And my perspective of this is that the tragedies that I deal with, I see daily, especially boat crashes, but also motor vehicles. So I know the both systems. But when you take a boating incident such as the Bartons' loss of their son, that there is nothing after a conviction when a judge orders that the operator of that vessel is no longer entitled to operate a vessel during the term of probation, that there's nothing that officers can check on the water. So if there's a vessel that's stopped and that operator is precluded from operating a vessel, there's no way for them to check. With this bill, we would be able to check that. Not only that, it would also give penalties for doing that, which is what we do with the Motor Vehicle Administration. It is the same. And so it would help in that way of keeping people who are not supposed to be operating from doing so, give us a penalty for that, but it also could set up a violation of probation as well. The purpose of this is not to just violate people, but it's to keep people safe. Motor Vehicle Administration does it, and they do it effectively, and it works. And when you see repeat offender after offender keep coming back time and time again, it is a public safety issue. And it's one that people don't realize until it happens. And then you realize that there's a missing piece, and this is a missing piece on the waterways of Maryland.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, distinguished members of the committee. My name is Patrick Gilbert. I'm the Senior Assistant State's Attorney in Wycomico County, and I'm here this afternoon on behalf of the Maryland State's Attorneys Association to urge a favorable report on Nick's Law, which is a bill that takes boating while under the influence seriously and makes an important first step in ensuring that our law does so as well. I want to very briefly draw the committee's attention to a subtlety about how probation conditions work in our courts, because I think that's going to be important when this committee debates the wisdom of this measure. Courts ordinarily enjoy broad discretion to fashion appropriate conditions of probation that relate to the offense for which someone was convicted in ensuring public safety, ensuring rehabilitation. Long story short, what that permits courts to do in driving while under the influence cases is prohibit individuals from operating motor vehicle for the duration of probation if the court sees so fit and if it's rationally related to the offense for which they were convicted. So a judge can say, even if the MVA gives you your license back, I don't want you driving while you're on probation, or I don't want you driving until you complete alcohol treatment. Because of this provision in the Natural Resources article about empowering courts to remove people from boats and say you can't boat for this period of time. Sort of a cruel irony of this provision. It's designed to give courts the ability to tell people who've been boating while under the influence, no, you can't boat, but it really restricts the court's authority to do that. So when we're engaged in discussion about this bill, which is a very, very important bill, please keep in mind that the delineations this committee sets out in what courts can and can't do, courts aren't in all likelihood going to be able to go beyond that. So there's 4 modalities of boating while under the influence. Right now, the bill covers the first one, which is the most serious one. I'd consider expanding it to all 4 modalities, maybe for the duration of probation. I'd yield to the committee's questions. There's a lot of subtlety and nuance in this issue that I'd be happy to answer in committee or offline. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. We also have a virtual favorable witness, Ian Goldstein from Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
Yes, apparently I can't, oh, there it is. Now I can start my video, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for allowing me to testify in support of HB 770. My name is Ian Goldstein. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs with Mothers Against Drunk Driving. MAD represents the millions of victims and survivors of drunken impaired driving crashes. MAD's mission is a future with no more victims, and MAD thanks Delegate Schmidt for authoring and introducing this life-saving legislation, and thanks the Barton family for their bravery of being at this hearing today. MAD urges the Maryland legislature to pass HB 770, which would make improvements to Nick's law by strengthening penalties for operating a vessel under the influence of alcohol or other impairing substances. In 2022, Maryland had 14 fatal boating crashes, and alcohol was the leading cause of crashes. According to the U.S. Coast Guard, boaters are 10 times more likely to be in fatal boating crashes with a blood alcohol content of 0.1. HB 770 not only strengthens the amount of time an offender is prohibited from operating a vessel on the waters, but it also creates a database with the Natural Resources Police Force accessible to a Natural Resources Police officer. The creation of a database will ensure that BUI offenders will not continue their behavior on Maryland's waterways, creating danger for operators of other vessels. Maryland's current BUI laws can deter someone from operating a vessel under the influence of drugs and alcohol. However, strengthening the current law with longer suspensions for those who break the law will make offenders think twice before operating a vessel while impaired. The goal of HB 770 is to deter illegal behavior on our waterways. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, please vote favorably for HB 770 to ensure safety on our waterways for everyone. Thank you. I apologize for the intern. My wife is picking up the other intern.
No, does the intern have anything to add? I think that's what the committee wants to know.
You have anything to add? Was the cookie good? The cookie only lasted for as long as it could.
Well, thank you very much for testifying. And on a more serious note, I just want to say to the Barton family, unfortunately, this is one of two bills that we have back to back where our state laws compounded or maybe even caused a tragedy. And so while we know it's difficult, it's really important that you're here because we have the power to change these laws, and your being here helps us do that. So thank you for doing what is hard and coming here today. And with that, we have some questions. Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Barton family for coming here and sharing your painful story. It really does help us put this in perspective. So we listen to you very carefully. My question is for the sponsor, Delegate Schmidt. Thank you so much for bringing this bill and bringing this to our attention. Maybe also for Dylan from Natural Resources. I'm trying to get an idea of how the process works, how the law enforcement works here. So if someone is involved in an accident on the, in a vessel, DNR is the enforcing agency. Is that correct? Okay. So then they arrest the person. How does it work? I mean, walk me through, like, then they go to court. I mean,
yeah. Well, and
I'm happy to jump in.
that would be, yeah.
Sure. I actually handle boat crashes. And so I actually go on scenes with Natural Resource. So what normally, and not every case, but what normally happens is Natural Resource Police will respond to whatever the incident that's taking place. A decision is made whether or not, if it's a fatal crash, certain protocols go into effect. And you can draw blood and things of that to do testing if there's any signs of impairment. So a decision could be made to arrest on scene. It can be made after we get the blood kit. That depends. So the timing issue could be different. The other case that recently just happened was the Slatterly, was a hit and run case here in Anne Arundel County, where it took us a month to figure out the operator of the vessel that left the scene. So you can have multiple ways of when that arrest could happen. So if it was something, what this bill is contemplating, if there is you stop a vessel and the operator is someone who is not allowed to be operating a vessel, then an arrest could be made right then at that time. But if you don't have that information freely available to you, how would you know that? It would be something that might happen on the back end where you find out later that someone so-and-so could not operate a vessel, and then we're going to have to file for charges at a later time, which could happen as well.
Yeah, and Delegate, the only thing I would add is this bill is about ensuring that our officers have the ability to have that system readily available.
Right.
So that way we can know whether or not that privilege has been revoked and that person shouldn't be on the water.
Okay, thank you. So once a person's arrested, then they go before a judge. And so can the judge also put the person in jail, right? They could.
Sure.
Yeah. So
the gentleman who killed Mr. Barton is in jail.
We heard that. So then when would the suspension begin?
It's during.
The prohibition against being able to operate a vessel. When would that begin?
Sure, that's during the term of probation. So if you're on probation for, to the judge can order that as part of the probation, that you not operate a vessel for 5 years. So it's put onto a docket sheet that shows everything that happened that this defendant must complete. It's transmitting that information to DNR, to Natural Resource Police, and then that way they have that information. Otherwise, it just kind of dies on that piece.
Let me ask it a different way. So if a person's sentenced to jail, it's a very egregious, like in this case with the Bartons, and let's say it's, a year in jail, I'll just pick a number. Then does the suspension on the water start, the 5 years start when they get out of jail, or when they get out of jail?
That is correct. It's during the term of probation, and probation wouldn't start until you're out of jail.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Apologize for taking so long to get to your answer.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. I didn't ask it very well.
You're asking now. I
Thank you.
apologize.
Thank you. That clears it up. Thank you.
Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, Delegate, great bill, fully in support of this bill. I represent a Bay district as well. So my question is, we have Marine Police in Baltimore County. My district, because of where it is, there's Coast Guard patrol a lot as well. I'm just curious about interoperability of these systems, right? So obviously we want DNR to be empowered, but I'm also curious, would Baltimore County or any other local jurisdiction be able to see this data? Would the Coast Guard be able to see this data? Because they're all often, engaging with folks on the waterways.
We didn't have those jurisdictions in the bill. I mean, it's something maybe we could add to it. I mean, we do have Coast Guard quite a bit, especially as you get further up the Chesapeake Bay. That would be something that we would maybe look at.
Yeah, and Delegate, I don't know the answer off the top of your head, but I'm happy to look into it with the Natural Resource Police and follow up as to specifically what information we share with the locals, and then follow up with you afterwards.
I'd appreciate that. And if this requires, something to help strengthen the bill, not to hurt, I would love to be a part of that process. Thank you.
Good question. Thank you. Delegate Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate, for bringing this bill. Mr. and Ms. Barton, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Just, again, kind of drill down what the current procedure is and what all this actually looks like. What is the standard for a BUI in Maryland, the blood alcohol content standard?
Same.
Is it the same? It's still 0.08?
Yes.
Okay. I only ask because I've lived in a number of states and moved around in the Army. Some states it's as low as 0.01. It's just any alcohol. I just didn't know if that was something we considered as well. Thank you.
Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to Mr. and Mrs. Barton. I'm so sorry for your loss, and what the chair said is so true. It's really important that you're here to tell the story and advocate for change. So thank you. This question is for Mr. Gilbert. Did I hear you say that we would not be, and looking at this bill, would not be able to change the penalties, whether it was for the jail time or the parole consideration, that there has to be that latitude that has to continue for the judge?
No. So the way the provision in the Natural Resources article currently exists, it empowers a court to prohibit an individual who's been convicted of boating under the influence from operating a boat currently for 1 year. And that's if they took a breath test and the result was 0.08 or above, or if they declined to take a breath test, which mirrors similar provisions in the transportation article. There isn't an analog of that whole provision in the transportation article. It's really unique to the Natural Resources article. And so in a sense, I'm speculating here because it hasn't been the subject of reported appellate precedent, but my best guess, the odds-on favorite, is that provision would be read by a court to be speaking directly to a court's authority to impose these conditions of probation. And because the legislature is currently silent on whether or not a court can restrict an individual's ability to operate a boat as a condition of probation on the other three modalities of boating while under the influence, that it would be unlikely that a court. So you can be boating while under the influence or boating while impaired by alcohol, or you could be boating while so far impaired by drugs or alcohol that you can't operate a vessel safely, or you could be boating while impaired by CDS. Those are the four modalities. And there's an argument, and candidly a persuasive one, that an individual who's convicted of boating while impaired, as opposed to boating while under the influence, a court wouldn't have the ability to restrict that person's opportunity to operate a vessel during the period of their probation. So I wanted to draw the committee's attention to that because the contours it sets out on the court's authority to impose this as a restriction on probation are really important because it is the alpha and omega of what a court can do with regard to that particular provision of probation. This committee can alter whether or not these offenses are incarcerable or parole eligibility. But this really just relates to whether or not and for how long and under what circumstances a court can restrict an individual's ability to operate a vessel while they're on probation or subsequent to a conviction.
Okay, that's a lot of information to take in.
I'm sorry.
Welcome to judiciary.
I think
There's a lot of, so this has been litigated for a very long time in the context of automobiles. And there's a really long backstory that I can share with you offline if you're interested about automobiles.
Okay, thank you. One quick question, Mr. Chairman, for DNR. What is there, do DNR police have any impoundment authority the way police do on roadways? Like, can they, what do they do if someone's operating a boat under the influence and then if they're alone or with other people that can't operate the boat, what happens to the boat?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I don't know particularly off the top of my head, but I'm happy to follow up. And I don't know if the state's attorney deals with it. I would assume we deal with abandoned vessels and derelict vessels all of the time, and we tow those as well to different locations in the state for disposal. But I am curious what the state's attorney
They
has.
can remove vessels and take it to someplace and tie the vessel up if someone is operating under the influence. They can also seize, that we do not seize often, but in crashes and things, we will take possession of those vessels because they're evidence and take them over to the eastern shore. But there are ways that vessels to keep someone from operating is to tie it up wherever, someplace safe and have someone else come and get it. So that does happen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Guyton.
Mr. Chair, and I appreciate all of my colleagues' questions today. Again, I just want to also reiterate how important it is that you are here, and my heart is breaking along with yours, and I know the rest of this committee. But I feel like you're doing good work today, and you're allowing us to do good work, which we really appreciate as a committee. And thank you so much for bringing this bill, Delegate Schmidt. I believe you touched on what my question was going to be, but like my colleague Delegate Lehman, it was a lot of information. So we were over here on this side of the table discussing the fact that we've heard from you and in the testimony that if you kill someone with a boat at probation, you at the maximum can only be prohibited from driving a vessel for 5 years. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Well, so it looked like the only thing changed under the bill, the way I'm reading it, is that 1 year was changed to 2 years.
Okay.
But that the 5 years is still the same as it was before this bill. That this bill is really just about the data system, correct?
So as it currently exists, the law, if this committee takes no action on this bill, the only amount, the amount of time a court could preclude an individual who's been convicted of boating while under the influence from operating a vessel is 1 year.
Okay.
Regardless of anything else, that's sort of the restriction. What this bill does is it expands it to 2 years. In the ordinary course, but if the conduct results in the death of another, expands it to 5 years.
Okay, so thank you. I appreciate that. So I did see the change to 2, but I thought 5 was already in regulation. Why 5? Because getting back in a boat and driving after killing someone after 5 years seems a little lenient to me.
Well, so the Maryland State Attorneys Association position on this bill is favorable, and no one's voted for me. I said the same thing in judicial proceedings just a little bit ago. No one's voted for me. I'm a senior assistant state's attorney. So I'm reluctant to speak on behalf of the association. But what I will say is that there are other contexts where this body has authorized courts to impose conditions that extend far beyond the term of probation and are enforceable through the court's inherent contempt power. I'm thinking specifically in animal abuse contexts. Courts are empowered to prohibit individuals who engage in felonious animal, so like really serious stuff, heinous stuff, a court can say, you're on probation for 3 years, you gotta, get treatment, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. And also for the rest of your life, you cannot own an animal. So probation expires and then that they still can't own an animal. That's one context in which I'm familiar with. I've seen it happen in animal abuse cases. I'm not sure if it's been, I don't think there's been any appellate precedent interpreting that, but I don't see any sort of constitutional or due process issues with those provisions. So that's certainly one option available to this committee to sort of vest courts in particularly egregious cases with that authority.
I think that's what I was looking for. Thank you. Thank you.
Delegate Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for the state's attorney. Is it illegal currently to be drunk on a boat?
On a boat? No, it's not. It is not. And I said over at the judiciary that one of the things you hear all the time is everybody drinks when they're out boating. I am appalled by that. I don't care if you're drinking and you're on a boat. I care if you're drinking and you're operating that vessel. It is no different than a car at all. There are no lines on the road. There's nothing. And it is, I would say it's even more dangerous, but we don't treat it the same. And this term, we have been working on bills where we're missing out on the boating laws do not mirror the traffic laws. And that is a real big flaw in our system here in Maryland. And I think the boating community is so large, it's just something that people just have not realized is missing.
Because it is illegal to be drunk in a car as a passenger.
No.
It is. Against the law now in a car.
I think it's illegal to drink in a car.
Open containers, to have an open container. I think, okay, you're asking, it is illegal to have an open container, to be drinking. I apologize. I thought you said just to be drunk.
I did.
To be drunk.
You can.
You can be a passenger in a car and be
Yeah.
intoxicated, but you cannot be active. You cannot have an open container.
Thank you.
But none of us should find out either way.
No.
Delegate Stewart.
You, Delegate, for bringing this. This is really important. Thank you to Mr. and Mrs. Barton. I echo what my colleagues have already said about how important it is for you to be here. I actually have 2 little sons, and I can't imagine, God forbid, if I ever lost one to something like this, I unequivocally would not have the strength that you're displaying today. So I really appreciate you all coming. My question's about points. If you have a DUI in a car, you get points on your license, and that's automatic.
Yes.
Are there points on a boating license?
So, so one of the interesting things that I've learned, I started at DNR over the summer and we had rigorous conversations about this bill. We don't actually license people to drive their boat. What they're required to get is a boater safety education card. And that is, and that's not, it's not equivalent to a license. So there is not a point system particular to that.
Got it. Yeah, because I think this is it makes it different because in the DUI context, you have a similar, you can lose your license to up to a certain number of years and judges have discretion, but there is no discretion to the points, which means that even if you have a lenient judge, that's automatic that you get the points. And since there's no similar point system here, I think, couldn't there be an argument that we should actually have a little bit more of a mandatory, I know the judges won't like this, but a little bit more of a mandatory revocation provision here because there's no points analog. Couldn't one make that argument?
I think somebody could make that argument, but I defer to the sponsor if he wanted to add
Yeah, I
anything.
mean, we and thank you, Delegate, for the question. We've looked at some other states that have some parallels to the MVA, where sometimes the boating record ties back to the MVA, maybe adds points to the MVA driver's license per se, but there should be something maybe we look at in future sessions that maybe discuss outlining some parameters that cover that. It's definitely a great question. We put this bill in place as kind of like a great starting point.
No, totally.
To have some more discussion, and I'll defer to some of the state's attorneys. Yeah. They deal with this every day.
Yeah.
I can fit through here. I've done a lot of research. I've had a lot of sleepless nights to do a lot of research with this. When I first approached wanting to do something with this boating. There's nothing in place. There is zero in place. It is not like DUI and BUI. There's no points. There's no losing your license. There is nothing. Certain states do. Louisiana, California's one, Texas is one. If you look up Louisiana's bill, I think they have one of the strictest, where I believe it's 1 year for your first offense, your license taken. As you get multiple offenses, obviously your license is revoked for longer. Here in Maryland, there is nothing. We had to start someplace. Believe me, when I went there, I wanted to come in full force and just have everything going to get, I mean, you name it. But we have to start someplace. We have to take, unfortunately, baby steps, because it's hard. I mean, everyone has to work together. You're going to have your pros and your cons. People are going to want this. People are going to want that. Why do you have this? Why do you have that? Having this database is your first step. There is no, DNR has no, MVA and DNR don't talk. This will at least be the first step. Believe me, I'm not done. I am not done fighting. And I won't stop fighting until we have laws in place to keep everybody safe on these waters. I am, like I said, I am a mama bear with claws. My son's death will not be in vain. Nobody else's death will be in vain. We need to get stricter laws. We need to be able to talk. MVA needs to talk to DNR. There's, nothing's going to get done until we start with this first step, and getting this first step and getting people being held accountable is what needs to be done. I mean, 18 months, was I happy with that? No. He's due to get out in March because of good behavior. I don't get to have my son do this, and he has 5 years, no boating. Who's going to prevent him? He lives on the water. Who's going to prevent him from getting out on that boat? At least with this bill, he gets caught. They have something that he can go back to jail for violating his probation.
Well, thank you again. Very powerfully put, and thank you again for coming.
Thank you again to the Bartons and to the sponsor and the rest of the panel. That concludes the bill hearing on HB 770. We'll now turn to our final bill of the day, HB 337, Delegate Love, Sarah Demick Langenkamp Act. And feel free to bring up your panel, Delegate.
Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, members of the best committee ever. I am Sarah Love, and it is my privilege to sit before you and present HB 337, the Sarah Demick Langenkamp Memorial Act. I'm joined by Sarah's husband, Dan, with whom I have been working to craft this bill. And I just want to say on the record, thank you, Dan, for fighting and continuing to fight to make sure that other families don't go through what you went through. In August of 2022, Sarah was riding her bike on River Road in my district and the chair's district in a bike lane. She was coming home from her children's elementary school. A truck turned to go into a parking lot and crossed the bike lane, hitting Sarah and killing her. On top of losing a wife, a mother, and an amazing diplomat, the already devastated family had to sit and watch as the driver of that truck received a $2,000 fine and 150 hours of community service. HB 337 would change the penalty for that to up to 2 months in jail and up to a $2,000 fine. HB 337 will send a message to other motorists that we care about cyclists like Sarah, and that when we say Vision Zero, we mean it. Thank you, and I urge a favorable report for HB 337.
Thank you, Delegate Love. Thank you, Chairman Corman, and Vice Chair Boyce. Sarah was killed 18 months ago, and my family is still recovering. Those who know grief know that you are always recovering. This was like an explosion in the middle of our house, and it's been difficult. We're struggling with half of our income, grief and trauma. I have a new childcare burden, all because a careless driver didn't realize that a bike lane was something that you need to take care about. As Delegate Love said, this bill says bike lanes matter. It tells society that these are protected spaces. This is a principle that we have in the law in Maryland. We are careful around school buses, and we stop. And there are penalties for running a school bus stop signal. Around school zones, we have protected spaces, and we have protected spaces around crosswalks, because we say there should be people other than cars should be able to use our streets. So this bill is simply extending the same penalty that you get for hitting somebody in a crosswalk to bike lanes in the state. And it increases the penalty to $2,000 also, which the crosswalk law does not have. It's a reasonable thing for, I think we can agree, a space that is important in our society, because we're trying to encourage people to use different types of transportation. Just want to say something else about equity. This is important for equity in Maryland as well, because if you're a Black American, for example, you're more than 3.5 times more likely to get killed on a bike. It's important for all Americans because we're at 40-year highs of pedestrian deaths and near 30-year highs of bicyclist deaths in America, because drivers are more distracted than ever, and because drivers are driving bigger and heavier and more dangerous cars than ever with bigger blind spots. So we need to take action, and this is one action. So I urge you to support the bill. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Susan Cohen. Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and Delegate Stein. It's nice to see you again. I've been before this committee many, many times, primarily in the years 2012 to 2016. And at that point, I gave up. I was working on older driver safety issues, and that never got solved, but I might be back. I'm here for the Sarah Langenkamp bill because my kid died in a bike lane also. He was killed, not immediately, but virtually killed, when an older driver crossed in front of him on a Saturday morning. He was in the bike lane. She knew he was there, and she looked for him ineffectively, as many older drivers tend to do. She crossed in front of him. He hit her car. He ended up on her driveway, and she sat on a wall and did not do anything about this crash. So here's my guy. He was a sophomore in 2011 at Johns Hopkins. And I'm sure there are people in this room that remember this crash, and me. So I just want to say that the penalty for the older driver that did this was a fine for the 3-foot bike law, a new law, and that was like $100 or something. And then the negligent driving without injury, because the officer did not check the correct box. So a couple $100. That was it. But there was a top-notch medical advisory board at MVA that could have evaluated the functionality of this woman behind the wheel, but no referral from the police. So now we go to bike lanes. So it is so important that House Bill 337 get passed to make a meaningful change to the law for Sarah Langenkamp. And I would say for Nathan Krasnopoler also. It is so important that drivers know that bike lanes exist. They don't notice them. They don't honor them. They don't realize they're a lane of travel. So it is with urging that this committee give it a favorable report, because drivers need to know that those lives of people using those bike lanes, and by the way, standing on West University at the scene of the crash, just yesterday, we had a scooter go by and a non-motorcycle thing go by, and we had several bikes using that bike lane across the street from Hopkins. All of those lives are important. And I urge you to give a favorable report to increasing the penalties and showing motorists that that lane contains the lives of real people, and they owe them a duty of care. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and committee members. My name is Nigel Sammer. I'm a member of the Maryland Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, board member of Bike Maryland, and chair of the Advocacy Committee of the Baltimore Bicycling Club. I've previously appeared before this committee as the face of the victim to testify in support of the vulnerable road user legislation. I'm here today to testify before you in support of HB 337, the Sarah Debbing Langenkamp Memorial Act. As a victim who twice has survived crashes, one in 2017, which some of you on this committee are aware of, and in 2020 here in Anne Arundel County, when 6 friends and I were hit by a driver, resulting in my dear friend being killed instantly. In 2022, 11 bicyclists were killed, and in 2023, that number has increased to 15. In 2023, 30% of Maryland roadway deaths were vulnerable road users, and those numbers aren't improving. Bike lanes represent, for bicyclists who are vulnerable road users, a protected space where we should be able to ride our bikes with some degree of safety. When a driver does not exercise caution when bicyclists are using a bike lane, the result can be deadly, as we have seen in the case of Sarah Langenkamp, a wife and mother of 2 sons and a US diplomat, and Nathan Krasnopoler, a 20-year-old student at Johns Hopkins. Penalties aren't the only answer, nor are they on their own sufficient, but they can serve as deterrents and a motivator for drivers to exercise greater caution and vigilance. HB 337 seeks to accomplish that by increasing penalties for those drivers that fail to exercise due caution and cause a crash that injures or even kills a person on a bicycle that was legally operating in what should have been a protected space. Bike lanes are meant to be a place on the roads where we as bicyclists, as people, should expect a greater level of vigilance and caution on the part of drivers. HB 337 is a step in the right direction, and I urge a favorable vote in committee and on the floor. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman, members of the committee. My name is Kyle O'Grady. I appear in support of this bill on behalf of State's Attorney John McCarthy and on behalf of the Montgomery County State's Attorney's Office, where I serve as a prosecutor in the Felony Trial Division and am the acting supervisor of the Traffic Fatality Unit. Section 21-1209 of the Transportation Article exists to protect operators of bicycles by establishing the responsibilities of drivers of motor vehicles. Now, these responsibilities are common sense. It's exercise due care to avoid striking cyclists, pass at a safe distance, don't throw things at them, and for today's purposes, most significantly, yield the right of way to a person lawfully riding a bicycle in a designated bike lane or on the shoulder. Now, at present, any violation of one of these provisions is a payable citation, even if it contributes to an accident and even if that accident causes a death. This bill does not change the responsibilities of either bicyclists or drivers of motor vehicles. Their respective obligations to follow the rules of the road remain the same, unchanged. What this bill does is add an incarcerable penalty for a violation of subsection D that contributes to an accident. These are circumstances in which the cyclist is not in a travel lane sharing space with a car, but rather in a designated bike lane or on the shoulder. It's using a separate portion of the roadway, a place where they should have the greatest level of protection under the law. This bill is consistent with our state's pattern of expanding protections to other vulnerable users of the roadway, as we've done with pedestrians, wheelchair users, play vehicles, and so on. And the proposed penalty here is identical to the statutes that expanded those protections to those other individuals. Moreover, by adding this penalty provision, we provide judges more discretion to appropriately differentiate more serious cases. For instance, drivers who are subsequent offenders or cases in which death occurs. And lastly, a violation that contributes to an accident becomes a must-appear citation, which extends the respect and recognition to an injured victim or to the next of kin of somebody who has died. It gives victims their day in court. For those reasons, on behalf of the State's Attorney's Office, I urge a favorable report on House Bill 337. Thank you.
Thank you all. Let me just say, Dan, I know you and Oliver and Axel are not just fighting here, but also in Congress for change. So thank you for all your advocacy and trying to turn something so awful into something positive. And Ms. Cohen, thank you as well for sharing your story and your experience. And we welcome you back to the advocacy role that it sounds like you were playing a few years ago as well. Are there any questions for these witnesses? Okay, I do not see any. So that concludes the bill hearing on HB 337. Colleagues, it's been a long week. We have a full day of bill hearings tomorrow after floor. And then after that, we are going to have a voting session. So the voting list should be out later tonight, but no surprises. It's all things working their way through the subcommittees. So we're not springing the governor's housing bill on you or anything like that. But the bill should be out. The list should be out later tonight. Delegate Stewart, do you have a moment in ENT history for us?
I do, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, it has been exactly 30 years since the start of the 1994 lacrosse season. And I want to wish one of our colleagues a hearty congratulations on this anniversary, because she led in that 1994 season a quote unquote speedy midfield for the Woodlawn High lacrosse team. So if everyone could put their hands together for our colleague, the good vice chair, Regina T. Boyce.
Okay, I was going to do subcommittee announcements, but Cheryl Love is out of the room. Patrick, do you know when they're planning to meet? Go ahead, Patrick.
Motor vehicles will be meeting at 4:45.
Patrick, I can't believe I have to tell you this, but don't touch the button. All right. Thank you all very much. Have a great evening.